From volcanic craters veiled in mist to jagged peaks wrapped in myth, the world is home to mountains so surreal they seem to belong to another realm entirely. In this journey across continents, we explore 20 of the most unreal and breathtaking peaks on Earth, natural wonders shaped by time, legend, and the raw forces of nature. Each mountain in this script tells a story of fire and ice, gods and spirits, ancient cultures and untouched wilderness. Prepare to be transported to landscapes where clouds cling to stone, where silence echoes across glacier and deserts, and where Earth's imagination runs wild. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Mount Kirkjufell rises like a sentinel from the north coast of the Snæfellsnes Peninsula in Iceland, its steep, conical shape piercing the sky like something conjured from a myth. With its name meaning Church Mountain in Icelandic, it evokes a silent reverence, as if nature itself sculpted this surreal monument to provoke awe in all who see it. Standing at just 463 meters, 1,519 feet high, its relatively modest elevation belies its otherworldly presence. From almost every angle, Kirkjufell appears symmetrical, a near-perfect pyramid rising against the backdrop of crashing waves and windswept tundra. This symmetry, especially when mirrored in the still waters of the adjacent Kirkjufellsfoss waterfall, forms an ethereal tableau that has earned the mountain its reputation as one of the most photographed spots in all of Iceland. Unlike many dramatic peaks formed through the uplift of tectonic plates, Kirkjufell is a sculpted remnant of volcanic activity and subsequent glacial erosion. Layers of lava, sandstone, and tuff tell a story millions of years in the making. One carved not by forceful emergence from the Earth's crust, but by patient shaving by ice and time. Glacier during the Ice Ages sheared away softer rock from around the area, leaving behind this isolated plug of ancient volcanic sediment. That isolation adds to its visual magic. No mountain range surrounds it, no competing peaks distract from its presence. It is a singular creation, standing defiant and alone. What truly elevates Mount Kirkjufell to legendary status is the interplay of its raw geology with Iceland's famously mercurial skies. Aurora borealis regularly dance above its crown during winter nights, their green and purple swirls adding layers of mysticism. In summer, the midnight sun lingers on its slopes, draping it in soft golden light for hours at a time. It is a mountain that never wears the same face twice. One morning it may loom menacingly behind a veil of storm cloud and rain. That same evening, it might bask serenely beneath pastel skies and the haunting stillness of twilight. The nearby Kirkjufellsfoss waterfall, a modest but elegantly layered cascade, offers perhaps the most iconic viewing platform. Photographers and travelers alike come to this small plateau, often at sunrise or sunset, to frame both mountain and waterfall in one shot, earth, water, and sky converging into one impossibly cinematic scene. In winter, the falls partially freeze, transforming the landscape into an ice kingdom. In autumn, when the mosses and grasses around the mountain flame gold and crimson, it seems almost as if Kirkjufell itself is on fire. Kirkjufell also whispers to those drawn by folklore and fantasy. Some believe it resembles a wizard's hat or the spire of some ancient citadel. It's no wonder the mountain earned a starring role in television's Game of Thrones, depicted as the Arrowhead Mountain, a mystical landmark beyond the wall. Yet long before it entered pop culture, it held a place in local Icelandic lore. Fishermen from nearby Grundarfjörður and other coastal villages considered it a protective guardian watching over the fjord. There are legends of elves living within the hill and of hidden folk traveling between the rocks and streams. To walk the trails encircling Kirkjufell is to step into a realm where science and myth blur, where geology and imagination share the same breath. Despite its remote allure, Kirkjufell is relatively accessible by road, with well-marked paths and informational signs for visitors. The hike to the summit, though, is not for the faint-hearted. It is steep and exposed in places, requiring ropes and scrambling on narrow ledges. Many opt to appreciate it from below, circling around its base where seabirds like puffins and Arctic terns nest during warmer months, and Arctic foxes sometimes pad through the underbrush. The scent of salt and moss fills the air, carried on strong North Atlantic winds. The distant sound of gulls merges with the rushing of streams, and silence settles heavy when the wind stills. But there is also something melancholic about Kirkjufell, a haunting beauty that seems aware of the fragility of its own existence. Climate change is altering the precipitation patterns and snowpacks of the region, changing how the land interacts with water and erosion. The glacier that once helped shape this peak are retreating, and the ecosystems around it are shifting. In this way, Kirkjufell stands not only as a monument of time past, but as a sentinel of time unfolding, its slopes bearing silent witness to both the ageless dance of nature and the urgent stirrings of change. There is a particular moment, often just after a light rain, when the clouds part and sunlight breaks through, gilding the grasses and lighting up the moss that clings to the rocks in a luminous green. Kirkjufell reflects in the shallow pools near its base, so sharply and cleanly it seems to hover between realities. It is then that one begins to understand why people travel across oceans to stand in its presence. It is not just the mountain's form or its setting, it is the feeling it gives you, that you are at the edge of something ancient, unspeakable, and vast. Not merely a peak in Iceland, but a touchstone to the unreal. Mount Olympus rises with solemn majesty from the plains of northern Greece, its highest summit, mythical, piercing the sky at 2,918 meters, 9,573 feet. It is not merely the tallest mountain in Greece, it is the axis around which a civilization once spun its most sacred beliefs, the mythical throne of Zeus and the celestial court of the 12 Olympian gods. Olympus is not just geography, it is mythology incarnate, a living monument where craggy ridgelines and storm-swelled peaks carry the memory of legends. Approaching Olympus from the town of Litakoro or the foothills of Dion, one feels immediately the weight of both history and myth. The mountain dominates the skyline, brooding and distant, often wreathed in mists that seem to defy meteorology. Locals will tell you that when the clouds roll in to crown Olympus, the gods are having counsel, or perhaps hiding from the mortal world. This tradition is thousands of years old, and yet, standing beneath the shadow of Olympus today, it's not difficult to understand how ancient people came to believe this place was divine. No other mountain in the region compares in stature or presence. It rises abruptly from the Thermaic Gulf, its base almost at sea level, which makes its ascent feel all the more staggering. Olympus is geologically young, formed by the compression of the African and Eurasian plates. Its rock layers tell a complex story of sedimentary upheaval, with limestone and dolomite carved into jagged towers, plunging gorges, and knife-edged ridges. The mountain is sculpted more by tectonic thrust and erosion than volcanic activity, giving it a raw, fractured appearance. Mythica's, the summit, is not a single peak but part of a cluster of sharp crags known collectively as the Throne of Zeus. From a distance, it looks impenetrable, a cathedral of stone rising into the heavens. Climbers and pilgrims alike journey upward through a landscape that changes with every meter gained. The lower slopes are forested with black pine, fir, and beech trees. These are ancient woods, thick with underbrush and echoing with the calls of cuckoos and woodpeckers. As one ascends, the forest thins into alpine meadows filled with rare herbs and wildflowers, some found nowhere else on Earth. The biodiversity of Olympus is astonishing. Over 1,700 species of plant life have been catalogued here, some of which have medicinal properties long known to traditional healers and perhaps even to the ancients themselves. Fauna, too, is rich and varied. Wolves and wild boar roam the deeper forests, while golden eagles will silently above the cliffs. Chamois, a kind of wild goat antelope, navigate the rocky highlands with effortless agility. It is a wilderness preserved through time. Mount Olympus National Park, established in 1938, was Greece's first and remains a stronghold of both natural and cultural heritage. As hikers make their way up the well-trodden Enopias Gorge or climb past Prionia toward the refuge at Spilios Agapitos, the feeling of Olympus as a liminal space grows stronger. There is a moment, usually at around 2,000 meters, when one crosses the tree line and enters a stark alpine zone. Here, the landscape is bare, stripped down to stone and wind. The silence becomes profound. The sky seems impossibly close. And it is here that ancient worshippers may have imagined the gods dwelling, in that space above the mortal world, but just within reach. Mythica's, the summit, is no casual climb. The final approach requires scrambling over exposed rock, with sheer drop-offs and weather that can change in minutes. It is not uncommon for clouds to roll in with sudden fury, bringing sleet, lightning, and cold winds even in summer. For those who make the summit, the view is transcendental. On clear days, one can see across the Aegean Sea to the island of Thasos, and far inland over the mosaic of Greek farmland and mountain valleys. The feeling is not just one of elevation, it is one of revelation. Ancient Greeks believed that Mount Olympus was not merely high, but holy. It was the sacred dwelling of the gods not because of its height alone, but because it touched the sky, where divine judgment and favor were thought to originate. From this perch, Zeus hurled thunderbolts, Poseidon watched the seas, and Hera surveyed the affairs of men. Though no physical temples were built on the summit, perhaps out of respect or fear, the lower slopes are dotted with ruins that mark religious reverence. At the ancient city of Dion, at the mountain's base, offerings and rituals were performed for centuries to honor the gods above. Olympus also became a potent symbol for modern Greece. In the 19th century, as the country struggled for independence, poets and philosophers invoked the mountain as a reminder of a glorious past and a divine destiny. Today, it is climbed not just by hikers but by pilgrims of a different kind, those seeking the intangible, inspiration, solitude, or a brush with the sublime. But Olympus is not frozen in myth. It is a living, shifting mountain, shaped daily by erosion, snowmelt, and human interaction. Conservation efforts work hard to balance tourism with ecological preservation. With thousands of visitors each year, trails must be maintained, habitats protected, and ancient relics safeguarded. Yet despite the foot traffic and camera clicks, there remains a deep and abiding silence on its upper flanks, a kind of cosmic hush that stills even the most skeptical heart. In the modern age, when the divine feels distant and myths are often dismissed as stories for children, Mount Olympus endures as a bridge between past and present, between human and God, between reality and something greater. It is a mountain that defies easy description. It must be felt, underfoot as you tread its paths, overhead as clouds swirl around its crags, and deep within as you glimpse what the ancients saw, not just a mountain, but a throne among the stars. Mount Damavand rises in solitary grandeur above the Alborz mountain range in northern Iran, a towering white sentinel that dominates the skyline for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. At 5,610 meters, 18,406 feet, it is not only the highest peak in Iran but the tallest volcano in the Middle East, an immense stratovolcano whose presence is as much symbolic and cultural as it is geographic. Its conical summit, often cloaked in snow even during the height of summer, is more than just a geological formation. It is a sacred symbol of Persian identity, woven into myth, poetry, politics, and national pride for thousands of years. Approaching Damavand, especially from the plains south of the Caspian Sea, the mountain appears like a phantom on the horizon, unreal in its proportions and surreal in its perfection. Its symmetry rivals that of Mount Fuji, and yet its setting is starkly different. Instead of forests and lakes, Damavand rises above arid hills, ancient villages, and windswept ridges. In winter, the peak blends into the icy sky, its slopes reflecting the pale blue of the heavens. In summer, it rises dramatically above green meadows and rocky outcrops, a lonely white crown above the dry spine of the Alborz. Geologically, Mount Damavand is relatively young. As a stratovolcano, it was formed by successive layers of hardened lava, ash, and pumice during periodic eruptions over the past 1.8 million years. It is still considered potentially active, with the last recorded eruption occurring roughly 7,300 years ago. Today, fumaroles near the summit continue to emit sulfuric gas, especially visible in warmer seasons. These plumes add to the mountain's mystical aura, as if it still breathes in deep volcanic slumber beneath the snow. In fact, the presence of sulfur has given rise to mineral-rich hot springs and healing waters in the surrounding regions, particularly in areas like Larijan, where sulfur baths attract both pilgrims and tourists alike. The slopes of Damavand support diverse ecological zones. Lower elevations are home to alpine meadows and patches of oak and juniper forests. Wild sheep, foxes, bears, and wolves inhabit the remote regions, and rare flora dots the highlands, including native medicinal herbs and wild tulips. As one ascends, vegetation gives way to black volcanic rock and icy scree. Higher still, above 4,000 meters, the terrain becomes stark and otherworldly, windswept ridges of ash and ice leading up to the crater rim. The final stretch is steep, and climbers must contend not just with loose footing, but thin air and sudden storms. Climbing Damavand is both a physical and spiritual journey. Each year, thousands of Iranians and international trekkers attempt the summit, often over multiple days. The southern route, which begins at Paulaur village and ascends past Barga Sevim shelter, is the most popular and offers a relatively accessible approach for fit hikers. However, there are also northern and eastern routes that are longer, colder, and more remote. Those who reach the top are rewarded not just with panoramic views that stretch across the entire Iranian plateau and the Caspian coast, but with the feeling of standing on the literal and symbolic roof of Persia. And it is here, at this intersection of earth and sky, that Damavand's mythic weight becomes fully felt. In Persian mythology, Damavand is no ordinary mountain. It is a prison for demons, a place of divine punishment and eternal struggle. The most famous legend tells of Zahak, an evil king with serpents growing from his shoulders, who was cast into a cave deep within Damavand by the hero Feridun. There, bound in chains beneath the mountain's peak, Zahak is said to slumber, waiting for the day of reckoning when he will rise again. This myth resonates deeply with the Iranian psyche, symbolizing the triumph of justice over tyranny, and the endurance of national spirit through hardship. Persian poets, too, have long revered Damavand. Ferdowsi, in the Shahnameh, references the mountain as a symbol of resistance and divine justice. Later poets like Sadi and Hafez invoke Damavand as a metaphor for steadfastness, clarity, and the sublime. The mountain's silhouette has appeared in art, miniatures, carpets, and manuscripts for centuries, a constant reminder of nature's majesty and the soul's striving toward the divine. Modern Iranians often speak of Damavand not just with admiration, but with affection. It appears on currency, in national emblems, and in everyday language. To rise like Damavand is to stand with pride and perseverance. Even during the most turbulent periods in the country's history, wars, revolutions, invasions, Damavand has stood unchanged, a pillar of continuity and quiet strength. In recent years, Damavand has also become a focal point for environmental concern. As climate change accelerates, the mountain's glacier have begun to recede. The once permanent snowcap now melts more extensively each summer. Researchers and activists warn that unless action is taken, the ecosystems and water sources supported by the mountain may be in peril. Local communities who depend on these waters for agriculture and life face increasing uncertainty, and so Damavand now stands not just as a mythic symbol, but as a modern environmental sentinel, one whose changes reflect the fragility of nature in the Anthropocene. Still, the spirit of Damavand endures. At sunrise, the mountain glows pink and gold, its shadow cast for miles across the rugged terrain below. Pilgrims kneel near sulfur vents, travelers warm their hands in village tea houses while watching the peak shimmer in the distance, and poets still climb in reverence, notebooks in hand, ready to be moved. It is a place where the air is thinner, but somehow the soul feels fuller. The mountain gives a sense of smallness that is not belittling, but humbling, a reminder that some things are older, grander, and more eternal than the world's worries. To stand on Damavand is to look into the very heart of Iran, not the Iran of borders and politics, but of myth, endurance, poetry, and stone. It is not merely the highest peak in the Middle East. It is a living dream, an eternal watcher, and a monument to the power of place to shape a people's soul. Mount Mulanje, known locally as Chain Peak or more reverently by its highest summit, Sapitwa, rises with haunting grandeur from the rolling plains of southern Malawi like the broken spine of some ancient titan. Towering at 3,002 meters, 9,849 feet, Sapitwa Peak is the tallest mountain in south-central Africa and the centerpiece of a vast granite massif that stretches more than 650 square kilometers. To behold Mulanje is to see a place where the Earth's crust seems to have risen in revolt, a monolithic wall of rock that looms abruptly above the surrounding tea estates, valleys, and villages, its jagged silhouette constantly shrouded in mists and mystery. From afar, Mulanje looks like a single, brooding mountain, but it is in fact an ancient geological complex, a plateau of high peaks, knife-edged ridges, and deep ravines split by cascading waterfalls and hidden gorges. The massif is composed primarily of syenite and granite, exposed by millennia of erosion that have stripped away the softer sedimentary rock. Its enormous cliffs, some of the highest in Africa, rise vertically for hundreds of meters, and the terrain above them becomes a rugged, undulating landscape of plateaus, forest pockets, and bare rock. Domes. These dramatic features have earned Mulanje the nickname the island in the sky. And like an island, it is biologically unique. The isolation of Mount Mulanje has fostered the evolution of species found nowhere else on Earth. Its steep slopes act as a natural fortress, sheltering ancient forests in its ravines and plateaus that have remained largely untouched by civilization. These forests are home to endemic flora such as the Mulanje cedar, Widringtonia whiteae, a critically endangered conifer found only in the high-altitude valleys of this massif. The cedar, with its aromatic wood and stately form, was once abundant, but illegal logging and wildfires have driven it to the edge of extinction. Today, conservation efforts strive desperately to restore its population, recognizing its ecological and cultural value to the people of Malawi. The fauna of Mulanje is equally extraordinary. The mountain shelters rare birds like the Thiolo ailva and white-winged opalis, both elusive forest dwellers with limited ranges. Small mammals such as hyraxes, rodents, and a few types of bats make their homes among the rocks and caves, while reptiles like skinks and chameleons slip through the undergrowth. Streams and springs born on the mountain feed into rivers that sustain entire communities below, making Mulanje not only a biodiversity hotspot but a vital water tower for the region. Sepitwa Peak, the highest point of the massif, is more than just a physical summit. Its name, Sepitwa, literally means "don't go there" in Chichwa, the local language, and carries a weight of supernatural reverence. To the Lomwe people, indigenous to the area, Sepitwa is sacred. It is believed to be the dwelling place of ancestral spirits and powerful forces that should not be lightly disturbed. Legends speak of travelers who disappeared after trespassing upon its heights, of spirit apparitions seen in the swirling mists, and of voices carried on the wind. These beliefs are not relics of the past. They are still alive among many who live in the shadow of the mountain, and traditional ceremonies are sometimes performed to appease or honor the mountain spirits. Despite the legends, the mountain today welcomes trekkers, naturalists, and adventurers from around the world. It offers an experience that is both physically demanding and spiritually profound. There are multiple routes to the summit, the most popular starting from the towns of Lycubula and Fort Lister. Trails pass through dense Miombo woodland and cedar groves, across roaring mountain streams, and up near vertical ridges. Hikers often spend several days navigating the mountain's varied terrain, staying in rustic huts maintained by the Mulanje Mountain Conservation Trust. Climbing Sepitwa requires not just stamina, but an intimate respect for the mountain's unpredictable nature. Weather changes in minutes. A warm sunny afternoon can become a thundering tempest, with wind lashing across the bare granite slabs and fog reducing visibility to a few meters. Lightning storms are common and terrifying at such heights, the bolts echoing across the cliffs with bone-shaking force. Yet in between these tempests lie moments of rare clarity, sunrises that illuminate endless valleys in gold, clouds that swirl beneath your feet, stars that blaze unhindered in the mountain sky. To walk across the high plateaus of Mulanje is to feel like you are suspended between earth and sky, at once grounded and transcendent. Mulanje is more than a mountain. It is a cultural cornerstone, a spiritual sanctuary, and an ecological lifeline. It feeds rivers that nourish the tea fields of Thiolo and Mulanje districts. It offers timber, both legal and illegal, and it attracts ecotourism that brings vital income to local communities. But with that importance comes pressure. Over the decades, deforestation, poaching, and unsustainable tourism have taken their toll. Climate change threatens rainfall patterns, increasing fire risk and reducing water availability for those below. Conservation initiatives now face a complex challenge: how to balance human need with the preservation of a landscape that is, by every measure, irreplaceable. One cannot help but be changed by standing on Sepitwa's summit. The wind there is fierce and pure, and the silence so deep it seems to hum. Below you lies a mosaic of forest, cliff, and valley. In the distance, the land flattens into the Shire Highlands and, farther still, into the soft haze of Lake Chilwa and the plains beyond. The scale of it humbles the heart. The stories of spirits and vanished travelers don't seem so far-fetched here, not because they are likely, but because the mountain itself feels alive in a way that resists modern logic. There are few places on Earth where geology, mythology, ecology, and culture converge with such force. Mulanje is one of those places. It is a monument not made by man, but honored by generations of them. It teaches endurance, reverence, and wonder. In its forests, time slows. On its cliffs, the world expands. And on its peak, Sepitwa, the line between the real and the unreal dissolves, leaving only awe. Mount Pico rises like a monolithic spear from the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, towering above the other islands of the Azores with an almost extraterrestrial presence. At 2,351 meters, 7,713 feet, it is not only the highest point in Portugal, but the third tallest volcanic peak in the vast Atlantic Ocean basin. From its base on Pico Island, a green, wind-lashed fragment of land adrift in the middle of the ocean, this stratovolcano surges skyward with a symmetry so precise and striking that it seems sculpted rather than natural. The effect is almost surreal. Mount Pico doesn't emerge gently from its surroundings. It explodes from the earth like a titan's arrow piercing the sky, its upper reaches often lost in thick fog or wreathed in its own cloud halo. Unlike most mountain ranges that extend from vast continental masses, Mount Pico stands almost entirely alone, born from the tectonic forces of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Its base lies at sea level, making its vertical prominence extraordinary. The island itself is of volcanic origin, and Pico is its dominant feature, its ruler, its shaper, and its spiritual core. Even from the neighboring islands of File and São Jorge, Pico's black pyramid commands the horizon, often illuminated in fiery hues at sunrise and sunset, and visible for more than 150 kilometers on a clear day. The sheer drama of its presence has earned it comparisons to Japan's Mount Fuji, but Pico is wilder, more remote, and less domesticated by tourism. It is raw Atlantic wilderness forged in fire and salt. The landscape of Mount Pico is otherworldly, sculpted by lava flows, volcanic vents, and centuries of seismic upheaval. The flanks of the mountain are covered in dark basaltic rock, layered in waves of frozen lava that snake down its slopes like the remnants of a sleeping dragon. The terrain is punctuated by jagged fissures, volcanic cones, and ancient lava tubes, some stretching for kilometers underground. Vegetation clings where it can. Low grasses, mosses, and lichens create small islands of green amid the vast fields of black stone. At lower altitudes, the slopes are cloaked in endemic forests, dense with laurel, heather, and juniper, survivors of ancient ecosystems that once dominated the Macronesian islands before human arrival. Climbing Mount Pico is an experience that blurs the lines between Earth and elsewhere. The trail begins near Casa de Montaña, a ranger station and base camp at around 1,200 meters. From there, the path ascends steeply over uneven volcanic rock, past fumaroles and weathered craters, winding upward through an increasingly barren and alien landscape. The final push leads to the summit crater, a vast amphitheater of rock where, often, plumes of steam can still be seen rising from fissures, signs that the mountain, while dormant, is by no means dead. Within the summit crater lies Pequeño, a secondary cone that crowns the mountain like a spike of obsidian. To reach Pico's true highest point, climbers must ascend this final spire, scrambling up sulfur-stained rocks where the air is thin and the winds fierce. From the top, the Atlantic stretches endlessly in all directions, its blue expanse broken only by the distant outlines of other Azorean islands. On clear days, one can see the neighboring islands of Graciosa, Terceira, and File glimmering on the horizon like scattered jewels. But often, clouds swirl below the summit, leaving climbers suspended above a cotton sea, standing alone in the sky. Yet Mount Pico is not just a geological marvel, it is a place of profound cultural and historical resonance. The island's people have long lived in intimate proximity with the mountain, shaping their lives and traditions around its moods and rhythms. For centuries, Pico Island was at the heart of Portugal's whaling industry, and the men who set to sea in tiny boats to hunt sperm whales would measure time and weather by the mountain's veil. If Pico wore a hat of cloud in the morning, it foretold rain. If it stood clear and proud, the sea was safe. Today, the economy has shifted, but the mountain still defines life on the island. The lower slopes of Pico are dotted with stone-walled vineyards, one of the most unique agricultural landscapes in the world. These vineyards, declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, are carved from black basalt and bordered by lava rock walls known as carrés. They protect the delicate grapevines from wind and salt spray, capturing warmth during the day and releasing it at night. The result is wine with a mineral-rich character, born directly from volcanic soil. This tradition, centuries old, continues today, producing the famed Verdelho do Pico, a white wine with sharp acidity and deep complexity, infused with the spirit of the land. Despite its isolation, Mount Pico has become a magnet for those seeking adventure, solitude, and communion with wild nature. Hikers, geologists, photographers, and spiritual pilgrims all find something on its slopes. The climb is not technical, but it is arduous, more than 1,100 meters of vertical ascent over unstable terrain. Wind, fog, and sudden storms are common, and every step is a negotiation with stone. But the reward is silence. Deep, cathedral-like silence broken only by the wind and the occasional cry of a seabird drifting inland from the ocean. At night, under a clear sky, the summit offers one of the most stunning stargazing locations in the North Atlantic. With almost no light pollution and a vast canvas above, the Milky Way unfurls in all its glory, and shooting stars streak across the darkness like silver arrows. The air is cold and pure, and the vastness of space feels somehow nearer atop the volcanic crown. It is no wonder that some travelers report a feeling of intense calm or even spiritual awakening after standing on Pico's summit. There, on the lip of a crater formed by fire, with the Atlantic glimmering under moonlight, the boundary between Earth and cosmos feels razor-thin. Pico is a mountain that resists being tamed. It is simultaneously accessible and remote, familiar and alien, quiet and thunderous. Its beauty is not the gentle, pastoral kind. It is a beauty forged in basalt and wind, a stern reminder of the Earth's primeval forces. And yet, within this austerity lies a profound sense of peace, a silence that speaks, a stillness that moves something deep within. To walk on Mount Pico is to step outside the ordinary world and into a landscape that feels suspended in time and space. It is a place where stone and sky meet in quiet defiance of the sea, where fire once shaped the earth into this solitary tower, and where even now, the heart of the mountain pulses just beneath your feet. Mount Triglav rises as the undisputed crown of Slovenia, not merely in terms of altitude, standing at 2,864 meters, 9,396 feet. It is the highest peak in the country, but as a powerful national symbol deeply ingrained in the cultural, spiritual, and historical identity of the Slovenian people. Situated in the heart of the Julian Alps within Triglav National Park, the mountain's three-pronged summit has long inspired folklore, literature, art, and political symbolism. Its very silhouette is emblazoned on the Slovenian flag and coat of arms, a visual echo of pride, endurance, and natural majesty. Triglav is more than a mountain. It is the beating heart of a nation. The name Triglav means three heads in Slovene, and refers to the mountain's triple summit, distinctive peaks connected by a dramatic, razor-thin ridge. These crags dominate the skyline of the upper Soa and Sava river valleys, and from certain angles, they resemble a crown or throne carved from stone. The mountain sits within the only national park in Slovenia, a protected expanse of over 800 square kilometers encompassing the wildest and most pristine alpine terrain in the country. Here, towering cliffs, turquoise glacial lakes, dense spruce forests, and meadows filled with wildflowers come together to form a landscape that feels untouched by time. The geological story of Triglav is one of ancient forces. Like the rest of the Julian Alps, it was formed through the collision of the African and Eurasian tectonic plates, which uplifted ancient seabeds over millions of years, compressing coral reefs, shells, and marine sediments into massive limestone and dolomite blocks. The result is a jagged landscape of pale stone that glows golden in the evening light and turns silver under the moon. Glacial activity during the Ice Ages carved deep U-shaped valleys and cirques, leaving behind a mosaic of ridges, ravines, and hidden glacial lakes that are the region like sapphires nestled in stone. Among the most beloved of these lakes is Lake Bohinj, a mirror-like body of water cradled by forested slopes and watched over from afar by the summit of Triglav itself. Less touristy than Lake Bled, Bohinj remains a tranquil sanctuary, a place where mist rises gently in the morning and dragonflies skim the surface as cows graze in nearby alpine pastures. Farther up, one finds the Triglav Lakes Valley, a high-elevation corridor filled with interconnected alpine lakes of stunning clarity, where the water changes from icy blue to emerald depending on the sky and sun. The journey to Triglav's summit is both a physical challenge and a rite of passage. There is a saying in Slovenia, "You are not a true Slovenian until you've climbed Triglav." While somewhat romanticized, this notion reflects the mountain's role in the national psyche. Each year, thousands of hikers, from seasoned mountaineers to first-time climbers, make the pilgrimage to its peak, often taking multi-day routes that wind through highland meadows, traverse scree-covered ridges, and past traditional alpine huts known as koe. The most popular starting point is the Pokluka Plateau, a high forested shelf that offers both access and breathtaking scenery. Other ascents begin from the Vrata, Kama, or Trenta valleys, each offering a different perspective on the massif. The final stretch of the climb, known as the Via Ferrata or Nafalk Way, requires caution and nerve. It involves fixed steel cables, ladders, and narrow ledges where climbers must focus intently, each step taken in proximity to 1,000-foot drops. Weather conditions at this altitude are unpredictable, and sudden storms can bring fog, snow, or violent winds even in midsummer. But those who persevere are summit revered by local Andean communities for centuries. The mountain consists of two main peaks, Huascarán Norte, 6,654 m, and Huascarán Sur, 6,768 m, connected by a dangerously narrow saddle known as La Garganta, the throat. From a distance, the twin summits appear like the frozen crowns of a slumbering giant, and from nearby, they loom with overwhelming scale, dwarfing the valleys, forests, and glacial lakes that encircle them. Huascarán dominates the skyline of the Ancash region and watches over towns like Carhuaz, Caraz, and Yungay, whose histories are intimately entwined with the mountain's benevolence and wrath. Geologically, Huascarán is a granite colossus, shaped over tens of millions of years by the grinding collision of the Nazca and South American tectonic plates. The immense pressures created the Andes, the longest continental mountain range on Earth, and the Cordillera Blanca, home to Huascarán, is its most glaciated range. The mountain's granite structure supports vast ice fields and dozens of hanging glacier, many of which descend dramatically into turquoise glacial lakes like Laguna 69 and Langanuco. These lakes, framed by vertical cliffs and framed by alpine meadows, are some of the most scenic and surreal landscapes in all of South America. Yet for all its beauty, Huascarán is also a place of enormous danger. The mountain lies within a region of extreme seismic and climatic activity. Earthquakes, avalanches, and ice falls have shaped not only the geography of the area but the lives of its people. The most tragic example occurred on May 31, 1970, when a massive earthquake triggered a landslide from the north face of Huascarán. A massive chunk of ice and rock broke free and descended at speeds approaching 300 km per hour, 186 miles per hour, obliterating the town of Yungay and killing over 20,000 people in seconds. Today, a white cross marks the site of the buried city, and palm trees that once lined Yungay's central plaza still stand, their trunks partially entombed in the debris field as silent witnesses to the disaster. This ever-present threat, however, has not dimmed the mountain's sacred aura. For indigenous Quechua communities who inhabit the valleys and plateaus below, Huascarán, called Mataraju in the local tongue, is an APU, a powerful spirit of the mountain that watches over the land. Offerings of coca leaves, chicha, fermented corn beer, and sacred chants are made to the APU to ask for good harvests, protection, and health. These rituals are part of a living cosmology that blends pre-Columbian beliefs with Catholic symbolism introduced during colonial times. Pilgrimages are made to the mountain's foothills, and stories are told of spirits that dwell in the ice, guiding climbers or punishing the arrogant. Climbing Huascarán is a formidable endeavor, suitable only for seasoned alpinists. Despite its tropical latitude, the mountain's extreme altitude creates conditions more severe than many Himalayan summits. The climb to the summit of Huascarán Sur is long, cold, and perilous, with dangers that include crevasse-riddled glacier, Sirac Falls, avalanches, and rapidly changing weather. The air above 6,000 meters is thin and sharp, offering little mercy to the unacclimated. Most expeditions take at least 6 days, with base camps set near Musho and high camps at various glacier shelves. Success requires not only technical skill but deep respect for the mountain's volatile temperament. Yet those who reach the summit often describe an experience beyond words. From the roof of Peru, the world unfurls in vast silence. Serrated peaks stretch into distant blue, valleys fall away into shadowed green, and clouds drift below your feet like slow smoke. The cold is absolute, but so is the sense of perspective. You are above the rainforests, above the clouds, above the breath of civilization. Only the sound of wind and ice remains. The region surrounding Huascarán is protected within Huascarán National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that preserves not just the mountain but over 340,000 hectares of rich biodiversity and indigenous culture. The park contains more than 600 glacier, over 300 lakes, and countless species of flora and fauna. Andean condors wheel above the cliffs, spectacled bears prowl remote valleys, and delicate orchids bloom in secret pockets of forest. The park is also home to archaeological ruins, traces of pre-Inca cultures that once worshipped the mountain and left behind temples, agricultural terraces, and burial sites now reclaimed by moss and stone. Tourism here walks a delicate line. On one hand, it brings vital income to local communities and raises awareness about the need for conservation. On the other, it brings environmental pressures, trail erosion, pollution, and the melting of glacier accelerated by human-induced climate change. In recent decades, Huascaran's glacier have receded dramatically. Once continuous ice sheets have fractured into disconnected patches. Glacial lakes are swelling, threatening to burst their natural dams and flood downstream villages. The sacred ice, once considered eternal, now weeps under a warming sky. But still, the mountain endures. It waits in quiet authority above the valleys of Ancash, a guardian and a warning. Huascaran is the kind of mountain that cannot be ignored. It shapes the weather, the water, the belief systems, and even the dreams of those who live within sight of its summit. Farmers in Karaz still glance toward its peak to forecast the rains. Children in Yungay grow up hearing the stories of their lost city and the spirits in the snow. Climbers come from every continent to challenge its frozen heights. And poets, painters, and mystics continue to find in its silhouette the perfect shape of permanence in a changing world. To see Huascaran is to see both beauty and violence, serenity and fury, glory and grief. It is a mountain that holds within it the full range of nature's power, creation and destruction, peace and peril. And in this, perhaps, lies its true allure. It is not simply a peak to be summit, but a force to be known. Mount Elbrus stands as the crowned monarch of Europe, a massive, ice-clad titan of volcanic origin rising 5,642 meters, 18,510 feet, above sea level. Nestled within the wild and rugged expanse of Russia's Caucasus Mountains, near the border with Georgia, Elbrus is not only the tallest mountain on the European continent but one of the legendary 7 summits, the highest peaks on each of the 7 continents. It is a mountain of contrasts, ancient yet youthful in volcanic terms, dormant yet still breathing faint warmth beneath the ice, remote yet globally renowned among mountaineers. Its snowbound twin peaks and gentle slopes offer deceptive tranquility. Beneath that white calm lies a powerful story of fire, myth, and frozen endurance. Geologically, Mount Elbrus is a stratovolcano, formed through successive eruptions during the Pleistocene epoch. Though officially classified as dormant, with no known eruption in recorded history, it is not extinct. Warm mineral springs to its lower slopes, and geothermal activity deep within the earth feeds an underground system of heat and movement that reminds scientists and climbers alike that Elbrus still slumbers, not sleeps eternally. Unlike the jagged granite spires of many neighboring peaks, Elbrus's twin summits, the western, 5,642 m, and eastern, 5,621 m, domes, are broad, rounded, and buried in deep, permanent ice, giving the mountain its signature white dome profile visible from great distances. The mountain rises abruptly from the surrounding landscape, a lone sentinel above the lesser ridges of the Caucasus, separated from the jagged main chain of the range by wide glacial valleys and river-carved plains. Its prominence is immense, not just physically, but symbolically. To many Russians, Elbrus is the roof of Europe, a place of patriotic pride and a frontier of exploration. For alpinists and adventurers, it's a coveted challenge, both technically achievable and geographically remote, a blend of beauty and danger not to be underestimated. Climbers often choose to ascend from the southern side, via the Baksan Valley, a high-altitude corridor of villages, alpine pastures, and ski stations that provides access to the standard route. Here, the climb can be supported by a unique blend of infrastructure and wilderness. Cable cars and snowcats can ferry climbers high up the slopes, while alpine huts and weather stations serve as staging points. This southern route is technically non-technical. There are no steep rock faces or knife-edge ridges, but its challenges are no less formidable. The altitude is punishing. Weather is wildly unpredictable. Whiteouts, windstorms, and extreme cold have turned more than a few summit bids into tragedies. Elbrus's deceptively soft profile lures the unprepared to peril. The northern route, far more remote and demanding, offers no such conveniences. Climbers must trek for days across isolated terrain, carrying their own gear and supplies, with minimal assistance. But those who choose this route are rewarded with solitude and raw natural grandeur, a side of Elbrus that retains its ancient wildness, where herds of wild Caucasian tur goats move through the high passes and wolves track silently beneath moonlit cliffs. On a clear summit day, the views from the western dome are nothing short of transcendent. The entire range of the Caucasus unfurls to the south, endless serrated peaks stretching across Georgia and into Armenia. To the north, the Great Eurasian Steppe rolls flat and vast under pale skies. The perspective is overwhelming. To stand atop Elbrus is to stand at the meeting point of Europe and Asia, of history and myth, of fire and frost. Elbrus is steeped in lore. In Greco-Roman mythology, this region of the Caucasus was the fabled land of the Titan Prometheus, who was bound to a mountain by Zeus for the crime of giving fire to humanity. Though the original myth doesn't specify Elbrus by name, local legends and centuries of poetic retellings have long associated this majestic, snow-covered peak with the scene of Prometheus's eternal punishment. Chained to a rock, his liver pecked daily by an eagle, and his pain renewed each day. It is a tale fitting for a mountain that embodies both suffering and endurance. In more modern times, Mount Elbrus has taken on new symbolism. During World War II, it became a contested high ground between German and Soviet forces. In 1942, Nazi mountain troops planted a swastika flag on one of its flanks in a symbolic attempt to claim the roof of Europe. Months later, Soviet forces recaptured the area and replaced it with their own banner. The conflict at high altitude mirrored the struggle on the plains below, and Elbrus became, once more, a witness to the passage of empires and ideologies across time. Today, Elbrus draws climbers from around the world, especially those pursuing the 7 summits. Its relative accessibility, compared to Everest or Denali, makes it a popular objective, yet it demands respect. The final push to the summit, especially from the saddle between the 2 domes, is grueling, a steep, ice-slick descent under low oxygen and bitter wind. Many climbers report hallucinations, nausea, and tunnel vision in the final hours. Success is measured not only in reaching the summit but in returning safely to tell the tale. Beyond the climb, Elbrus's surrounding landscape is a wonder of biodiversity and cultural diversity. The lower valleys are home to ancient Circassian, Borca, and Karachay communities, descendants of mountain tribes who have lived in the region for centuries. Their traditions, languages, and hospitality infuse the journey with warmth and depth. Visitors may share meals of shashlik and kiking, meat skewers and stuffed flatbreads, hear local legends told by firelight, or glimpse traditional dances performed against the backdrop of glacial waterfalls. The ecology of the region is equally captivating. The alpine meadows explode with color in summer, edelweiss, alpine asters, and wild poppies dotting the green slopes. Ibex, marmots, and golden eagles inhabit the cliffs and ridges. The glacier, though receding under the pressure of global warming, still command awe, massive frozen rivers creaking and cracking as they move imperceptibly down the mountain's flanks. Scientists monitor them closely, for they are both the lifeblood of the region's water supply and a barometer of Earth's changing climate. To climb Elbrus is not just to conquer a summit, it is to step into a layered world of myth, war, geology, and silent splendor. It is to cross paths with the breath of giants, the scars of history, and the elemental extremes that forge endurance. Whether one reaches the summit or not, the mountain leaves its mark. The memory of its wide, white slopes, the bite of wind at dawn, and the haunting quiet of a world far above the noise of civilization linger in the soul long after descent. Mount Elbrus stands alone, not just in height but in meaning. It is the peak of a continent, the throne of a fire god turned to ice, and a mirror that reflects back whatever courage, fear, or longing one brings to its slopes. Mount Cook, or Araki in the Maori tongue, is the towering soul of New Zealand's South Island. Its highest peak, standing sentinel at 3,724 meters, 12,218 feet, robed in snow and eternal ice. This mighty mountain is the crown jewel of the Southern Alps, a range that rips like a spine through the South Island, forged by tectonic forces and sharpened by glacier over eons. Araki or Mount Cook is not merely a geographic summit, it is a sacred ancestor in Maori mythology, a rite of passage for mountaineers, and one of the most breathtaking natural icons in the Pacific world. Its name alone speaks to this dual identity. Araki, meaning cloud pisser, evokes the spirit of an ancient being, while Mount Cook, bestowed by European settlers in honor of Captain James Cook, anchors it in colonial history. The mountain's pyramid-shaped summit rises from a world of deep-cut valleys, vertical ridgelines, and rivers of ice, many of which feed into mirror-like glacial lakes that glow with a milky, opaque blue, Lake Pukaki being the most famous among them. These lakes are tinted by finely ground rock flour, the powdered stone created as glacier grind relentlessly down the valleys, a constant reminder of the raw, patient force that carved this place. On clear days, Araki reflects perfectly on the surface of these waters, the symmetry so precise that it's hard to tell where the earth ends and the sky begins. Araki Mount Cook lies within the Araki Mount Cook National Park, part of the larger Te-Waipunama UNESCO World Heritage Area, recognized for its unspoiled alpine ecosystems and staggering biodiversity. This region includes not only the towering peaks of the Southern Alps, but also more than 140 glacier, wildflower-strewn meadows, braided rivers, and native beech forests. Here, the balance between ice and life, stillness and movement, is felt in every gust of wind and crunch of stone underfoot. The Hooker Valley, a glacial trough that extends directly beneath the mountain's south face, is one of the most accessible and iconic landscapes in New Zealand. Hikers can follow a well-maintained trail across swinging suspension bridges and past cascading rivers, eventually arriving at Hooker Lake, a surreal body of water filled with floating icebergs, often with Araki looming behind it in silent majesty. The combination of towering cliffs, glacial debris, turquoise water, and the distant, glimmering mountain forms a tableau that feels too perfect for reality, an image that lingers long after the journey ends. But as magnificent as it is from below, Araki's true nature is revealed on its slopes. The mountain is one of the most challenging climbs in Australasia, steep, exposed, and heavily glaciated. Unlike many of the 7 summits or iconic peaks of similar altitude, Araki demands significant technical skill. Its weather is fierce and fickle. Storms sweep in off the Tasman Sea with little warning, transforming blue skies into a whiteout maelstrom in minutes. Avalanches are frequent. Rockfall and crevasse danger are ever present. For mountaineers, Araki is a test of endurance and judgment, a summit not to be taken lightly. The Linda Glacier route is the most commonly used ascent, yet it is not standard by global climbing standards. It involves navigating heavily crevassed terrain, ascending steep snow and ice faces, and crossing the notorious Linda Shelf, an exposed traverse often lined with seracs above and cliffs below. Conditions change dramatically year to year due to glacial movement and climate shifts, making each attempt a unique and unpredictable undertaking. The summit push is long, often begun in the dead of night, and climbers must move quickly to avoid being caught in deteriorating weather as morning progresses. Many have come to know this mountain not just as a climb, but as a spiritual journey. To the Ngi Tahu Iwi tribe, Araki is not just a natural feature but a living ancestor. According to Maori legend, Araki was the eldest son of the Sky Father Rakanui and Earth Mother Papatnuku. He and his brothers sailed from the heavens to visit their stepmother but became stranded when their canoe was overturned. The brothers climbed atop the canoe, and as the cold south wind froze them, they were turned into stone. The canoe became the South Island, Tuwaka o Araki, and the brothers became the peaks of the Southern Alps, Araki being the tallest among them. Because of this sacred origin, the mountain holds tapu, spiritual significance, and traditional Maori do not seek to stand on its summit out of respect. This reverence reflects a deeply embedded ethic of balance and humility in the face of nature's power, an understanding that to walk among the mountains is to walk among ancestors. Even in contemporary times, this dual naming of the peak, Araki Mount Cook, reflects a national commitment to honor both indigenous heritage and the colonial past. One of Araki's most famous associations is with Sir Edmund Hillary, the New Zealander who would go on to be the first confirmed person to summit Mount Everest in 1953. Hillary trained on Araki's glacier and ridges, cutting his teeth on its treacherous terrain, which proved excellent preparation for the Himalayas. He later described the mountain as both a formidable opponent and a generous teacher. His legacy lives on not only in history books, but also in the nearby Sir Edmund Hillary Alpine Centre, located at the base of the mountain, which educates visitors on the region's geography, mountaineering history, and indigenous culture. The ecosystem around Araki is rich despite its harshness. Alpine parrots known as kia, highly intelligent and mischievous, frequent the trails and huts, often stealing gear or playfully harassing climbers. Tahr, chamois, and red deer, introduced species now integrated into the mountain's ecosystem, roam the crags and meadows. Native birds like the rock wren and New Zealand falcon, Creria, sweep through the valleys. In spring and summer, alpine meadows burst into color. Moss campion, gentians, and the iconic Mount Cook lily, which is actually a type of buttercup with large white petals, to the rocky soil with fragile beauty. The glacier, such as the Tasman Glacier, the longest in New Zealand, are immense, powerful bodies of ice that seem timeless but are in fact retreating with alarming speed. Glaciologists and conservationists closely monitor the changes. Once solid ice walls have collapsed into meltwater lakes. Routes once popular with climbers have become treacherous due to shifting crevasses and icefall. The mountain, like many around the globe, is changing rapidly, its icy permanence melting in real time. Still, for all these changes, Araki remains. It dominates not just the skyline, but the emotional and cultural landscape of New Zealand. It speaks to the ancient past and the uncertain future, to the resilience of nature and the fragility of ecosystems, to the boundless ambition of climbers and the quiet reverence of those who watch it from afar. To witness Araki in the golden light of dawn, to hear the boom of an avalanche echo down its flanks, or to watch its reflection ripple across Lake Pukaki in windless silence, is to be confronted by something immense and elemental. Here, in the deep south of the world, far from cities and noise, stands a mountain that pierces not only clouds, but hearts. Mount Apo rises in smoldering silence from the island of Mindanao in the southern Philippines, a giant cloaked in mist, rainforest, and the deep pulse of volcanic energy. Standing at 2,954 meters, 9,692 feet, it is the tallest mountain in the Philippines, a stratovolcano whose sprawling form is as massive as it is majestic. Apo's summit is not a single towering cone, but a broad, rugged massif stretching across a vast expanse. Its upper reaches pocked by craters, fumaroles, and sulfur vents, and its lower slopes draped in dense jungle teeming with life. It is a mountain that commands reverence, not only for its sheer scale and prominence, but for its cultural, ecological, and spiritual weight. Geologically, Mount Apo is an active stratovolcano, though it has not erupted in recorded history. Its last known eruption is uncertain. Some suggest minor eruptive activity in the distant past, but it remains geothermally active, as evidenced by its steaming vents and the acrid tang of sulfur that drifts across the higher altitudes. Unlike the more explosive volcanoes of Luzon, such as Mount Pinatubo or Maern, Apo sits like a sleeping god, massive, still, but very much alive beneath its forested skin. Its volcanic origin is etched into every ridge and valley. The mountain was built by countless eruptions that layered lava, pyroclastic debris, and volcanic ash into its vast shoulders, creating a terrain both beautiful and brutal. Massive rock slides, mudflows, and earthquake activity have shaped its flanks, while torrential rain and erosion have carved deep ravines into its slopes. The result is a mountain that defies easy classification. It is not one symmetrical cone, but a series of jagged ridges, rolling plateaus, and broken crater walls, shrouded in cloud and dripping with life. Mount Apo is the centerpiece of Mount Apo Natural Park, a protected area spanning over 64,000 hectares and encompassing a stunning range of ecosystems, from lowland dipterocarp forests to high-elevation mossy cloud forests and alpine grasslands. This incredible vertical diversity makes Apo one of the richest centers of biodiversity in Southeast Asia. Over 270 bird species call the mountain home, including the critically endangered Philippine eagle, Pithecofaga jeffrey, the national bird of the Philippines and one of the largest, most powerful eagles in the world. With its shaggy crest and fierce gaze, the eagle is as elusive as it is regal, nesting only in the highest, most inaccessible parts of Apo's forest canopy. Other rare and endemic species populate the forest, including the Mindanao bleeding heart dove, Apo sunbird, and the red-bellied pitta. Mammals like the Philippine warty pig, flying lemurs, and the golden-crowned flying fox inhabit the mountain's shadowy glens and upper ridgelines. The forest is alive with sound, cicadas, frogs, birdsong, and the rustle of unseen movement in the undergrowth. Towering trees, laced with vines and orchids, reach toward a canopy filtered by fog and filtered light. In the cloud forest, everything glistens with moisture. Moss carpets the ground, bromeliads hang from branches, and water drips from leaves in a rhythmic, ancient cadence. Climbing Mount Apo is a journey through these biomes, and one of the most iconic treks in the Philippines. There are several major trails to the summit. Among the most popular are the Kapatagan Trail, from Digos, the Kidapawan Trail, from North Cotabato, and the Banzalan Trail, each offering a different window into the mountain's ecological and geological wonders. The ascent can take anywhere from 2 to 4 days, depending on route and pace, with campsites set deep in the forest or along grassy ridges overlooking the Mindanao landscape. Trekkers begin in farmland and banana plantations, where the tropical heat is heavy and the trails wind past small communities and local homesteads. As the trail ascends, the dense jungle takes over, roots snaking across the path, bamboo groves creaking in the wind, and tree ferns unfurling like green scrolls. The air grows cooler, and the soundscape changes from the buzz of insects to the hush of highland breezes. Eventually, the forest gives way to barren volcanic slopes, a sudden shift to a stark landscape of loose rock, sulfur vents, and ochre-stained boulders. Here, the smell of sulfur is strong, and plumes of steam curl from hidden fissures, reminders of the sleeping fire below. The final approach to the summit is both beautiful and grueling. The trail narrows to a steep incline that traverses loose scree and windswept ridges, with little shelter from the elements. The views expand dramatically. On a clear day, you can see across Mindanaro's undulating hills, crater lakes, and distant coastlines. The summit itself is crowned by a series of jagged craters and a wind-battered grassland plateau, with small rock markers built by generations of climbers who have reached this sacred point. Here, the wind howls, the temperature drops, and silence hangs heavy in the thin air. You are standing on the roof of the Philippines, above the clouds, above the birds, above the noise of daily life. Many climbers bring flags, offerings, or prayer tokens to leave at the summit, in part homage, in part respect. For centuries, the mountain has been regarded as a sacred space by the indigenous peoples of the region, including the Bagobo, Manobo, and Tagabawa tribes. To them, Apo is the dwelling of spirits, a holy mountain that must be approached with humility. Rituals are performed before entering its domain, and hunters or travelers once sought permission through chants and offerings. Even the name Apo reflects this sacred heritage. It is derived from Apo Sandawa, the revered ancestral spirit said to reside in the mountain. Traditional healers, or Babalan, once came to Apo to seek visions, healing plants, or communion with the spirit world. Many of these traditions remain today, passed down through oral histories and community rituals that continue to honor the mountain's presence. Despite its isolation, Mount Apo is not immune to human pressures. Logging, agricultural encroachment, and illegal settlements have all left their mark, threatening the forest and its inhabitants. In recent years, conservation efforts have intensified. National park protections, reforestation projects, and community-based ecotourism have helped curb some of the damage, but challenges remain. Climate change is altering rainfall patterns, destabilizing slopes, and impacting the fragile highland ecosystems. The Philippine eagle, in particular, remains critically endangered, with fewer than 400 individuals estimated to exist in the wild, many of whom depend on Apo's dwindling canopy for survival. Yet the mountain endures, just as it has for millennia. To ascend Apo is to move not only through geography but through layers of myth, memory, and biological wonder. It is a place where the earth breathes in steam and jungle breath, where ancestors walk in wind, and where every footfall echoes deeper than sound. Whether seen from afar, its summit veiled in clouds and lit by golden light, or experienced up close, on muddy trails, beside sulfur vents, under starlit skies, Mount Apo reveals itself slowly, like a story told over generations. It is not a place to be rushed. It is a mountain that teaches patience, resilience, and awe. Mount Kenya rises like a granite cathedral from the heart of the East African landscape, its ice-capped spires glinting above the golden savannas and undulating plains of central Kenya. At 5,199 meters, 17,057 feet, it is the second highest mountain in Africa, following Kilimanjaro, yet in many ways, it is even more visually dramatic, more rugged, more glaciated, and steeped in deeper spiritual resonance. This ancient extinct volcano, sculpted over millions of years by fire and ice, is not just a physical landmark but a cultural and ecological monument, sacred to the Kikuyu people, a vital water source for millions, and one of the few equatorial regions on Earth where snow still lingers year-round. Geologically, Mount Kenya is a stratovolcano formed roughly 3 million years ago during the Pliocene epoch. In its prime, it may have once towered as high as 7,000 meters, dwarfing even Kilimanjaro, but millennia of glacial erosion and volcanic collapse have worn it down to its present rugged glory. What remains is a massif of sharp, serrated ridges and jagged peaks, clustered around a central complex that resembles the broken crown of an ancient king. The twin summits of Batian, 5,199 m, and Nelian, 5,188 m, are sheer rock pinnacles, dramatically cragged and capped with permanent glacier, while the more accessible Point Lenana, 4,985 m, offers trekkers a reachable summit experience that doesn't require technical climbing. The higher elevations of Mount Kenya are carved by tarn-filled cirques, hanging valleys, and slow-moving glacier, though these icy remnants are rapidly receding. Glacier like Lewis, Tyndall, and Gregory once spilled deep into the mountain's gorges. Now, many have retreated to icy fingers clinging to the upper cliffs, melting under the pressures of a warming world. Nevertheless, these alpine landscapes, punctuated by knife-edge ridges, turquoise glacial lakes, and dramatic rock towers, remain among the most stunning and unique on the African continent. Mount Kenya is encircled by Mount Kenya National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and Biosphere Reserve that encompasses over 700 square kilometers of pristine wilderness. This protected area is a remarkable example of vertical zonation, where every few hundred meters of altitude brings a dramatic change in climate, vegetation, and animal life. At the base, lush montane forests thrive, home to elephants, bushbucks, colobus monkeys, and leopards. These give way to bamboo thickets and giant heather moorlands, where the landscape transforms into a surreal high-altitude dreamscape. Towering giant lobelias and senecios, plants that can grow over 6 meters tall and survive nightly frosts, create an almost alien terrain, haunting and beautiful in equal measure. These unique flora have adapted to the harsh freeze-thaw cycles of the mountain's upper reaches, where temperatures can swing drastically between day and night. The Dendrosenecio Keniodendron, or Mount Kenya giant groundsel, is a flagship species of this zone. It stores water in its thick stems and protects itself with dead leaves that act as insulation, a biological testament to the endurance needed to thrive on this mountain. The routes up Mount Kenya vary dramatically in difficulty, landscape, and reward. The Siraman route, often favored for its gradual ascent and drier climate, passes through forest and moorland, opening up into stunning alpine valleys. The narrow Moru route is the fastest way to reach Point Lenana but includes the notorious vertical bog, a section of deep, muddy trail that tests even the most patient trekkers. The Chogoria route is arguably the most scenic, winding past Lake Ellis, Lake Michelson, and the breathtaking Gorges Valley, a vast canyon of eroded cliffs, waterfalls, and mist-covered ridges that feel plucked from a fantasy novel. While Point Lenana is a popular trekking destination, the twin peaks of Batian and Nelion are reserved for serious mountaineers. Technical rock climbing is required, and routes like the North Face Standard Route and Normal Route involve complex navigation, vertical pitches, and exposure to harsh mountain conditions. Successful summits depend on not just physical endurance but deep alpine expertise and careful weather planning. Yet beyond its physical grandeur, Mount Kenya carries a powerful spiritual significance. For the Kikuyu people, Kenya's largest ethnic group, the mountain is the sacred dwelling place of their god, Nai. According to Kikuyu cosmology, Nai made his home at the summit of the mountain, and the Kikuyu were placed at its foothills to live and prosper under his watch. To this day, Kikuyu homesteads are traditionally built with the front door facing Mount Kenya, an architectural homage to this sacred orientation. Prayers, blessings, and ceremonies are often conducted while facing the mountain, and it is not uncommon to meet locals who speak of the peak not as a pile of stone and ice, but as a living ancestor. The mountain also played a vital role in Kenya's struggle for independence. During the 1950s, Mau Mau freedom fighters used the forests of Mount Kenya as a strategic hideout in their guerrilla campaign against British colonial rule. The dense forests provided cover and sustenance, and the fighters viewed the mountain as a symbol of strength, rooted in the land's deepest soul. To this day, Mount Kenya remains a symbol of national pride and resilience, a backdrop to both cultural identity and historical memory. In the modern era, Mount Kenya is increasingly seen as an ecological and climatic bellwether. Its shrinking glacier are among the most visible casualties of global climate change. Where once thick ice blanketed the summit, only patches remain. Scientists estimate that Mount Kenya could lose its last glacier within a few decades, a loss that would not only alter the mountain's character but disrupt the region's water supply, as the mountain feeds major rivers like the Tana and Ewaso Nyiro, which nourish farms, cities, and wildlife sanctuaries far downstream. Efforts to preserve Mount Kenya are intense and ongoing. Conservation initiatives, reforestation programs, and sustainable tourism projects aim to protect both the ecological integrity and cultural sanctity of the mountain. Local communities, often employed as porters, guides, and rangers, play a key role in managing visitor impact and restoring degraded habitats. Their deep connection to the mountain makes them not just custodians of the trail, but guardians of tradition. To witness sunrise from Point Lenana is to see the soul of Africa laid bare. The snow-touched peaks turn gold under the morning sun, shadows recede from the vast valleys below, and clouds swirl like ocean waves against ancient cliffs. The air is thin, every breath a conscious effort, and yet the overwhelming sense is not one of exhaustion but of awe, of standing in the quiet presence of something immense, ancient, and eternal. Mount Kenya is not a mountain you conquer. It is a mountain that receives you, watches you, and asks you to listen. It is both monument and mystery, guardian and guide. A place where earth meets sky, where glacier whisper their last songs, and where every rock, plant, and shadow seems alive with memory. Mount Kirkjufell, the cold peak, rises with stoic grandeur from the rugged, remote borderlands of western Mongolia, its icy summit piercing the skies of the Altai Mountains like a blade of white steel. At 4,356 meters, 14,291 feet, Kirkjufell is the highest mountain in Mongolia, a land more commonly associated with vast steppes, nomadic herders, and desert plains than towering alpine giants. Yet here, in this far-flung corner of the country, where Mongolia meets China and Russia, exists a realm that feels untouched by time, carved by glacier and ruled by the quiet majesty of the elements. Mount Kirkjufell is part of the Tavan Massif, or 5 sacred peaks, a cluster of towering summits that crown the Altai Tavan National Park, one of the most isolated and spectacular regions in Central Asia. The mountain range stretches across borders, with Kirkjufell itself perched directly on the Mongolia-China frontier. The remoteness of the region cannot be overstated. This is one of the least accessible corners of the earth, where roads are few, towns are distant, and the silence is profound. Reaching the base of Kirkjufell requires long overland travel across sweeping steppe, high plateaus, and glacial valleys, often on horseback, camelback, or off-road vehicles bouncing over rivers and rocks. Geologically, the Altai are some of the oldest mountains in Asia, formed over 500 million years ago. Unlike the young, sharply folded Himalayas, the Altai have been deeply weathered over millennia, giving rise to a more rounded yet still dramatic profile. Jagged ridges, knife-edged passes, and glacier-scoured slopes. Kirkjufell, however, defies this softness. It is ice-armored and imposing, its northern and eastern faces steep and wrapped in thick glacier that crawl down into the valleys below. The most prominent of these is the Potanin Glacier, the longest in Mongolia, which unfurls like a frozen river through the high Altai, cracking and carving with a low, thunderous groan in summer. The name Kirkjufell is a reflection of the mountain's stark climate. Kirkjufell means cold in Mongolian, and even in midsummer, conditions here can be harsh. Blizzards can strike without warning. Temperatures plummet below freezing at night, and high winds sweep the exposed ridges. In winter, the mercury can fall to -40 degrees Celsius, and the region becomes a monochrome wilderness of ice, stone, and sky. Despite its remoteness, the mountain holds profound spiritual significance for the local Kazakh and Tuvan nomadic communities. The Tavan Bogd, 5 saints or 5 sacred ones, are revered in local animist and shamanic traditions. The mountains are seen as living spirits or ancestral beings, protectors of the land and the people. Even today, when herders pass beneath the peaks, they may offer kadags, sacred silk scarves, whisper prayers, or leave tokens beneath ovu, stone cairns that mark sacred spots. These offerings are not gestures of superstition, but deep-rooted expressions of respect for a landscape that provides and punishes in equal measure. Climbing Mount Kirkjufell is not a technically demanding endeavor in the way Himalayan or Andean peaks are. Its routes are often snow and ice ascents over moderate slopes, but the challenge lies in its extreme isolation and unpredictable weather. Most expeditions begin in the provincial capital of Algai, a town with a strong Kazakh cultural presence, where climbers gather permits and supplies before heading out across the tundra and into the mountains. A typical route involves a multi-day trek to base camp near the Potanin Glacier, followed by a summit attempt that requires crampons, ropes, ice axes, and high-altitude endurance. The final summit push usually begins in darkness, the cold air biting at exposed skin as climbers crunch up the glacier under headlamp light. As dawn breaks, the eastern sky lights up in hues of violet and gold, revealing a vast landscape of snow-covered peaks, glacier, and rolling highland deserts stretching into the Russian and Chinese frontiers. From the summit, the view is otherworldly, a 360-degree panorama of untouched terrain, with no towns, no roads, no sign of civilization, only the rumpled crust of Earth's ancient bones extending to the horizon. It's a silence so total that one hears the wind like a voice, the creak of ice like whispered warnings from deep time. Descending from Cuaten offers more than just physical relief. It's a re-entry into a world that still feels primal. Along the way, trekkers may encounter wild ibex, Argley sheep, the largest wild sheep in the world, or even snow leopards, though sightings are vanishingly rare. Golden eagles wheel in the alpine sky, and marmots scamper across rocky outcrops. The biodiversity of the region is surprisingly rich, especially considering the harsh climate. The Altai Mountains serve as a biogeographic crossroads, where species from Siberia, Central Asia, and Mongolia intermingle. Equally striking is the human culture of the region. The Kazakh eagle hunters, known for their tradition of hunting foxes and hares with trained golden eagles, live in felt yurts called zhuz, moving with the seasons across wide valleys and foothills. These herders live in symbiosis with the land, grazing livestock, tending to horses, and maintaining a lifestyle that has changed little over centuries. Visitors who venture far enough may be welcomed into a family's ger, offered kumis, fermented mare's milk, and regaled with tales of the mountains, spirits, and winters that crack the very bones of the earth. As climate change encroaches, even this ancient realm is not immune. The glacier of the Altai, including the mighty Potanin, are retreating. Water levels in glacial lakes are fluctuating, and the permafrost is beginning to thaw. For the nomads, this means changes in pasture cycles, water access, and livestock health. For scientists and conservationists, it means a narrowing window to study and preserve one of the last great wildernesses of the Central Asian highlands. But for now, Mount Cuaten remains a place of raw, unfiltered grandeur. It is a land where the elements speak louder than men, where tradition and nature are braided into one, and where the cold, clean air strips away pretense, leaving only humility and wonder. Here, in the farthest west of Mongolia, the roof of the nation scrapes the clouds, watching in silence as centuries come and go beneath its icebound gaze. To set foot on Mount Cuaten is not merely to climb a peak, it is to leave the world behind, to cross into the mythic edge of Asia where nature remains unconquered, where spirits ride the wind, and where cold, stone, and sky become indistinguishable. Mount Sinai rises from the barren heart of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula like a stone altar carved by time and belief, its reddish-brown slopes etched with centuries of footsteps and silent prayers. Known in Arabic as Jebel Musa, or the Mountain of Moses, it stands at 2,285 meters, 7,497 feet, modest in height compared to the world's alpine giants, yet monumental in cultural, spiritual, and historical weight. This peak, barren, beautiful, and solemn, is one of the holiest places on Earth, venerated across 3 major world religions and enveloped in stories that span millennia. Here, stone and scripture converge. This is the mountain, according to Jewish, Christian, and Islamic tradition, where Moses received the 10 Commandments, a moment that reshaped the spiritual architecture of civilization. The mountain is part of the South Sinai mountain range, a rugged and austere landscape sculpted by tectonic uplift and relentless erosion. The terrain is harsh, jagged granite ridges, deep gorges, and open valleys scorched by the sun and frozen by night winds. There are no trees, few animals, and precious little water. Yet amidst this geological desolation blooms a profound serenity. The very absence of distraction invites reflection. The silence is total, save for the cry of a desert falcon or the whisper of sand on stone. This is a place where the air feels thin with mystery, where every boulder seems to hum with ancient memory. Climbing Mount Sinai is not an expedition of technical challenge, but of spiritual endurance. Pilgrims and hikers alike typically begin their ascent before dawn, guided by stars or the flickering light of headlamps. There are 2 main routes to the summit. The more gradual Saket Sayyidna Musa, or camel path, winds in long switchbacks up the western slope and is wide enough to accommodate camels, often rented by those seeking to conserve their energy. The second, more demanding trail is the Steps of Repentance, an ancient stone staircase carved by monks, 3,750 rough-hewn granite steps ascending directly to the peak, each step a physical echo of spiritual striving. Reaching the summit just before sunrise is a nearly sacred ritual. As the sky lightens over the eastern horizon, waves of orange and gold creep across the stone faces of the Sinai Mountains. peaks and valleys, once hidden in darkness, are bathed in a radiant glow. The silence of dawn is profound. For many, this moment evokes deep introspection or reverence, the feeling of standing at the edge of time, in a place where the divine once walked among mortals. It is not unusual to witness tears, quiet prayer, or hushed singing as the sun crests the distant mountains. On the summit itself, small chapels and cairns commemorate the site's spiritual gravity. A simple structure, Chapel of the Holy Trinity, crowns the peak, built on the ruins of older shrines and aligned with traditions that span centuries. Though often locked, the chapel stands as a symbol of continuity and sanctity. Nearby, a small mosque reflects the mountain's significance in Islam. Nestled at the base of Mount Sinai is one of the oldest and most revered Christian monasteries in the world, St. Catherine's Monastery. Built in the 6th century by order of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, this fortress-like complex is named after St. Catherine of Alexandria, a Christian martyr said to have been carried to Mount Sinai by angels after her death. The monastery is a living monument, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a treasure trove of sacred texts, icons, and architecture. Within its walls lies the Burning Bush Chapel, believed by tradition to be located where Moses encountered the miraculous bush that blazed without being consumed. A descendant of that bush, a gnarled, thorny shrub known as Rubus sanctus, still grows within the monastery's inner courtyard, tended to by monks as a living relic of that divine encounter. The monastery's library, second only to the Vatican in importance for early Christian manuscripts, houses Greek, Arabic, Aramaic, Syriac, and Georgian texts, many of which date back to the 4th century. Its scriptorium was active long before much of Europe had begun preserving written knowledge. The monks of St. Catherine's Monastery, members of the Eastern Orthodox Church, have lived in near-continuous isolation for over 1,400 years. Their hospitality is humble and heartfelt, offering pilgrims tea, bread, and spiritual guidance. They maintain ancient rituals of prayer and labor, and their presence lends a contemplative gravity to the entire region, proof that faith and solitude can coexist in the harshest environments. Beyond its religious significance, the natural surroundings of Mount Sinai are equally captivating. The broader Sinai Peninsula is an ecological crossroads, where African, Mediterranean, and Asian species overlap. Though the high-altitude terrain is stark, it hosts a surprisingly resilient flora, acacias, wild herbs, medicinal shrubs, and succulents that cling to life in crevices and dry stream beds. Occasionally, Bedouin tribes, primarily the Jabalia, whose ancestors were brought from the Balkans by Justinian to serve the monastery, lead visitors through these mountains, sharing stories passed down through generations. Their knowledge of the land, its plants, animals, and rhythms, is born not of maps, but of memory. The mountain's spiritual draw has persisted through the centuries, attracting everyone from Christian hermits and Islamic scholars to Jewish mystics and secular adventurers. Its power is not rooted in height or physical grandeur, but in its metaphysical significance. It is one of the few places on Earth where so many traditions converge around a single peak. Even for those who do not subscribe to a particular religion, there is a feeling, intangible but palpable, that this place holds something beyond the visible. Some describe it as divine presence. Others, a psychological clarity. But few leave unchanged. And yet, this sacred geography faces modern threats. Tourism, though vital to the local economy, brings challenges of erosion, litter, and overuse. Efforts to protect the fragile mountain environment are in place, but the balance is delicate. Climate change has begun to alter rainfall patterns and water availability in the region, affecting not only plant life but the rhythms of the Bedouin tribes who have long called the Sinai home. Political instability in surrounding areas has, at times, cast a shadow over this ancient sanctuary, reminding us how quickly sacred spaces can become vulnerable. Still, Mount Sinai endures, an unbroken silhouette against the burning sky, an altar of rock upon which stories were carved not in ink, but in light and stone and silence. It is a place where humanity has for millennia paused to listen, not just for the voice of God, but for their own soul's echo. The climb is steep, the path hard, but the reward is timeless. Whether you come seeking the divine, solace, or simply the clarity of wind and space, Mount Sinai receives all with the same eternal stillness. And as the sun rises once again over its ancient summit, casting golden light across the valleys and walls of time, you realize, this mountain is not just a witness to history. It is a participant. It remembers. Mount Kirkjufell, also known as Changbai-shan in Chinese, is a volcanic titan that straddles the border between North Korea and China, and stands not only as a geographical marvel, but as a symbol of origin, identity, and power for two nations steeped in contrasting histories. At 2,744 meters, 9,003 feet, it is the highest peak on the Korean peninsula and one of the tallest in northeastern China, but its significance extends far beyond elevation. Crowned by a vast crater lake and wrapped in legends that stretch deep into national myth, Mount Kirkjufell is one of the most enigmatic and politically charged mountains on Earth. Geologically, Mount Kirkjufell is an active stratovolcano, formed over hundreds of thousands of years by the violent collision of subterranean forces. Its most dramatic moment in recorded history came in 946 CE, when it unleashed one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions of the last 2 millennia, the Millennium Eruption, also known as the Tianqi Eruption. This cataclysmic blast spewed ash as far as Japan, Siberia, and Greenland, and left behind the massive caldera we see today. The volcano's summit collapsed inward, forming a giant crater nearly 5 kilometers wide, which eventually filled with snowmelt and rainwater to become the ethereal Heaven Lake, Lake Chonji in Korean, or Tianqi in Chinese. This lake, sitting at an altitude of about 2,189 meters, 7,182 feet, is one of the highest crater lakes in the world, and its still, cobalt-blue waters reflect the jagged, snow-dusted caldera walls that encircle it. The serenity of the lake masks the mountain's volatile heart. Kirkjufell remains very much alive. Small eruptions and seismic activity have been recorded in recent centuries, and modern monitoring by both Chinese and North Korean scientists continues with growing urgency. The potential for another large-scale eruption is not just a scientific concern, it's a geopolitical one. Yet for all its geological power, the greater weight of Mount Kirkjufell lies in myth and memory. For the Korean people, especially in the north, Kirkjufell is revered as the sacred birthplace of the Korean nation. According to Korean mythology, the mountain is the cradle of the legendary figure Dangun Wangyeom, the founder of Gojoseon, the first Korean kingdom, established in 2333 BCE. The mountain's name, Kirkjufell, translates to white-headed mountain, evoking its snowy crown and divine purity. It appears in national anthems, revolutionary songs, and official iconography. In North Korea, it is considered the sacred mountain of revolution. This ideological framing has been reinforced by the regime of Kim Il-sung, North Korea's founding leader, and his successors. Official narratives claim that Kim Jong-il, the Deer leader, was born on the mountain in a secret guerrilla camp during Japanese colonial rule under the aurora-lit sky, though historians widely dispute this, asserting he was born in the Soviet Union. Regardless of factual accuracy, the symbolic power of Kirkjufell in North Korean state mythology is immense. The mountain appears on currency, propaganda posters, and military emblems. Pilgrimages to its slopes by citizens, soldiers, and party members are not simply tourism, they are acts of ideological devotion. On the Chinese side, the mountain is known as Changbai-shan, or Forever White Mountain, and it too holds immense cultural significance. It has long been revered by Manchu and Jurchen tribes, and was considered sacred ground during the Qing dynasty, whose rulers traced their mythical ancestry to the area. The emperors would dispatch annual sacrificial rituals to the mountain, and the region remains a symbol of historical legitimacy and ethnic pride for the Manchu people. Today, Changbai-shan is a major tourist destination, with carefully maintained roads, cable cars, observation decks, and national parks that frame the mountain in a much more accessible context than the North Korean side. The contrast between the two sides of the mountain is stark. From China, visitors can take a bus and elevator nearly to the top, explore extensive visitor centers, and enjoy resorts in the surrounding foothills. The infrastructure is modern, the tourism organized. On the North Korean side, access is far more restricted. Travelers, primarily domestic or carefully vetted foreigners, trek through forests and along rustic roads, often accompanied by guides and security personnel. The experience is more austere, more controlled, and more intensely symbolic. A granite obelisk, commemorating Kim Jong-il's birthplace, marks a heavily promoted tourist stop. Statues of the leaders often stand in stark contrast to the mountain's natural silence. Despite the political divisions, the mountain's ecology is shared. The region is home to rich biodiversity, particularly in the Changbai-shan Nature Reserve in China. Dense forests of Korean pine, birch, and spruce cover the lower slopes, giving way to alpine meadows and tundra at higher elevations. Amur tigers, leopards, lynx, musk deer, and sable prowl its hidden valleys, though sightings are rare and often elusive. The plant life includes endemic alpine species and medicinal herbs that have been used for centuries by local communities. Several waterfalls cascade from the cliffs surrounding Heaven Lake, most notably the Changbai Waterfall, a 68-meter torrent that erupts from the lake's overflow point and forms the headwaters of the Songhua River, an important tributary to the Amur. In winter, the entire mountain range transforms into a frozen wonderland. Icy mists cloak the forest, and the lake becomes a solid mirror reflecting the sun's ghostly light. In summer, the caldera fills with clouds and fog, concealing and revealing the lake like a celestial secret. For those few who manage to climb from the North Korean side, usually via the Samjeon region, the journey to the summit is strenuous but deeply moving. The final approach involves a steep staircase up a lava flow to the crater rim. The view from the summit, when weather permits, is astonishing, a vast bowl of sapphire water enclosed by craggy peaks, with sweeping views down to green forests, distant villages, and windswept plateaus. On a clear day, the boundary between earth and heaven seems to blur. Despite tensions between North Korea and China, there have been joint scientific efforts in recent decades to monitor Pictu's volcanic activity, particularly after seismic swarms were detected in the early 2000s. Geologists, volcanologists, and seismologists from both nations have gathered data and installed monitoring stations, sometimes secretly, sometimes publicly, attempting to unravel the mountain's internal rhythms. A major eruption today could threaten millions of lives in both countries, making Pictu not just a site of cultural significance, but a potentially destabilizing force of nature. And yet, for all its volatility, Mount Pictu retains a kind of sublime stillness. It is a mountain shaped by myth as much as magma. For Koreans, it is the heartbeat of a nation, the source of their people's origin story and revolutionary soul. For Chinese, it is a cradle of dynastic history and natural grandeur. For outsiders, it is one of the most mysterious and politicized mountains on Earth, wrapped in fog, guarded by ideology, and pulsing with hidden fire. To stand on its rim and gaze down into Heaven Lake is to be momentarily lifted beyond the present, into the realm of creation stories, dynastic dreams, and volcanic slumber. It is a place where continents meet, where empires rise and fall, where legends are born, and where silence speaks louder than banners. Mount Pictu is not merely a mountain, it is a crucible of power, memory, and awe. Table Mountain rises above Cape Town not just as a backdrop but as a sentinel, a towering flat-topped guardian that dominates the skyline, shapes the weather, and imprints itself deeply upon the identity of South Africa's oldest city. Though modest in elevation at 1,086 meters, 3,563 feet, its sheer cliffs, unique silhouette, and striking plateau make it one of the most iconic mountains in the world. From its summit, the land falls away in every direction. Toward the urban sprawl of Cape Town below, the shimmering blue curve of Table Bay, the dark Atlantic Ocean, and the sprawling Cape Peninsula to the south. But perhaps what gives Table Mountain its almost mythical status is the dramatic cloud phenomenon that often cloaks its summit, a rolling mass of white mist locals call the tablecloth, as if the gods themselves were preparing for a meal. Geologically, Table Mountain is ancient, among the oldest mountains on Earth. Its flat summit is composed of Table Mountain sandstone, a durable quartzitic rock laid down during the Silurian period, over 450 million years ago. The base layers, older still, are made up of Malmesbury shale and the intrusive Cape Granite Suite, which formed from molten rock pushing through the crust eons ago. Over time, the hard sandstone cap resisted erosion, while the softer rock around it was worn away, leaving behind the flat-topped massif we see today. What remains is an enormous block of rock, 3 kilometers wide and 240 million years older than the Himalayas, looming above sea and city, like a monument carved by time itself. Despite its iconic flatness, Table Mountain is far from featureless. Its summit plateau is broken by deep fissures, hidden ravines, and sculpted rock formations, while sheer cliffs plunge dramatically on all sides. At the mountain's eastern flank stands Devil's Peak, while to the west looms Lion's Head and Signal Hill, forming a natural amphitheater around Cape Town's city bowl. Together, they compose a distinctive landscape known to many as Ho'erikwago, mountain in the sea in the language of the indigenous Khoi Khoi people, who revered it long before colonial history arrived. The mountain's famous tablecloth cloud forms when moist air from the southeast rises with the summer winds, hits the cooler summit, and condenses into a thick blanket that spills over the cliffs. It's a phenomenon as reliable as it is awe-inspiring, and its sudden appearance can transform the mountain's appearance in minutes, from a sunlit slab of stone to a mythical stronghold shrouded in vapor. A local legend explains it differently, that the devil and a retired Dutch pirate named Van Hunks are locked in an eternal pipe-smoking contest atop the mountain, and the clouds are the smoke from their never-ending duel. Ecologically, Table Mountain is a biological treasure chest, forming part of the Cape Floristic region, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of only 6 recognized floral kingdoms in the world. Despite covering a tiny fraction of the Earth's surface, this region is home to over 9,000 plant species, and more than 1,500 are endemic to the mountain itself. The vegetation is dominated by fynbos, a unique heathland biome that includes proteas, ericas, and restios, many of which bloom in dazzling seasonal displays. Table Mountain's flora is not only beautiful, but highly specialized, adapted to the thin soils, strong winds, and frequent fires that define this Mediterranean-type ecosystem. The fauna is more subtle but no less significant. The summit plateau is home to rock hyraxes, locally known as dassies, small, furry mammals that resemble oversized rodents but are, surprisingly, the elephant's closest living relatives. Caracals, mongoose, porcupines, and a variety of birds such as sunbirds, steppe buzzards, and Cape sugarbirds also inhabit the mountain. Reptiles like the Cape-girdled lizard and the rare ghost frog hide among the rocks and streams. Leopards once roamed these slopes, though none remain today, and baboons can still be seen further south on the Cape Peninsula. Human interaction with Table Mountain spans millennia. The earliest known inhabitants, the San and Khoi peoples, regarded the mountain with reverence, as a spiritual site and a vital water source. Ancient rock art discovered in nearby caves and shelters hints at a deep cosmological connection with the land. When European explorers arrived in the 15th century, most notably the Portuguese navigator Bartolomeu Dias and later Jan van Riebeeck, the mountain became a landmark for seafarers, a signal that they had reached the turning point around the Cape of Good Hope. Today, visitors from across the globe ascend the mountain via the Table Mountain Aerial Cableway, a marvel of engineering first opened in 1929 and completely modernized in the 1990s. The rotating cable car provides 360-degree views as it climbs nearly a kilometer in just a few minutes, depositing passengers on the edge of the summit plateau. But for those seeking a more intimate experience, dozens of hiking trails snake up the mountain's flanks, offering vastly different experiences. From the gentle slopes of Platteklip Gorge to the rugged climbs of India Venster, Skeleton Gorge, and Kasteelspoort. Each route reveals new faces of the mountain, hidden waterfalls, sandstone overhangs, panoramic vistas, and rare plant life visible nowhere else on Earth. At the summit, the air is crisp, and the horizon seems infinite. Cape Town unfurls below like a patchwork quilt, the sea sparkles with wind-whipped waves, and in the distance, Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 18 years, sits quietly in the bay, a visible reminder of the mountain's role not only in natural history, but in the story of resilience and justice. Table Mountain has become a powerful national symbol in post-apartheid South Africa, appearing on the flag of Cape Town, on stamps and emblems, and in countless works of art and literature. It is a unifying presence, a shared point of pride that transcends the country's complex past. Yet, like all ecosystems of beauty and fragility, Table Mountain faces threats. Invasive species, particularly alien trees like pine, acacia, and eucalyptus, have altered the fire regime and water table. Wildfires, while natural to the fynbo cycle, have grown more intense and dangerous due to human interference. Tourism, too, poses challenges. Litter, erosion, and trail degradation must be managed constantly to preserve the integrity of the mountain's ecosystems. Conservation efforts, led by Table Mountain National Park and local environmental groups, remain robust and ongoing. Educational outreach, habitat restoration, and sustainable visitor guidelines all form part of a long-term strategy to ensure that this global icon remains pristine for generations to come. For those who experience Table Mountain, whether gazing at it from a cafe in the city center, scaling its weathered paths, or standing atop its summit in the whipping wind, there is an undeniable sense of grandeur, connection, and belonging. It is a mountain that does not merely rise above the city, it defines it. It is at once wild and accessible, ancient and alive, vast yet intimately familiar. Table Mountain is not just a flat-topped landmark. It is a sacred stage, where clouds perform their silent plays, where flowers bloom in fire's wake, and where the spirit of South Africa stands tall, unshaken, and endlessly enduring. Mount Ararat rises like a vision from legend across the plains of eastern Turkey, an immense, symmetrical, snow-draped cone soaring into the sky above the rugged Anatolian landscape. At 5,137 meters, 16,854 feet, it is the tallest mountain in Turkey and one of the most visually striking peaks in the world, its elegant volcanic form dominating the surrounding terrain with solitary grandeur. But beyond its awe-inspiring physical presence, Ararat is a mountain of deep myth, identity, and longing, and is most famously associated with one of humanity's oldest and most enduring stories, the landing place of Noah's Ark after the Great Flood. The mountain is actually a stratovolcano, long dormant but not extinct, formed millions of years ago by tectonic activity at the collision point of the Eurasian and Arabian plates. The main summit, known as Greater Ararat, is permanently capped in snow and glacier, while to its west stands Lesser Ararat, a smaller cone rising to 3,896 meters, 12,782 feet, together forming a volcanic massif that towers above the desolate steppe lands and high plateaus of eastern Anatolia. The peak is so vast and visible that it can be seen from over 100 kilometers away, and its scale becomes more imposing the closer one approaches. Its base is a colossal bulge in the Earth's crust, rising out of relatively low, flat land with a stark and sudden majesty. Despite lying entirely within modern-day Turkey, Mount Ararat holds sacred and emotional significance for Armenians, who have regarded it as a spiritual and national symbol for millennia. In Armenian tradition, Ararat is the resting place of Noah's Ark, following the biblical flood recounted in Genesis. This belief is deeply embedded in the collective consciousness of the Armenian people, so much so that Mount Ararat is depicted at the center of the Armenian coat of arms, even though the mountain lies outside the borders of Armenia itself. From the capital city of Yerevan, Ararat is clearly visible on clear days, looming just across the Turkish border like a lost homeland in stone. For Armenians, Ararat is not merely a mountain. It is a living memory of ancestral suffering, endurance, and yearning, particularly in the wake of the Armenian genocide of 1915, during which hundreds of thousands were driven from eastern Anatolia. The mountain has become a symbol of identity and exile, of sacred heritage now out of reach. Poems, songs, and artworks across generations reflect this melancholy intimacy with Ararat, often described as ours, yet untouchable. The sense of longing is especially poignant for the diaspora, many of whom trace their roots to villages that once lay in the mountain's shadow. The Noah's Ark connection has given Ararat global renown. According to the Book of Genesis 8:4, the Ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. While the plural mountains likely referred broadly to the Armenian highlands, later traditions, particularly from the 4th century onward, singled out this singular peak as the actual site. Over the centuries, numerous expeditions have been launched in search of the Ark, often driven more by faith than geology. Some have claimed to find petrified wood, strange structures, or satellite images suggesting man-made formations beneath the ice. Despite the lack of verifiable scientific evidence, interest in the Ark's supposed resting place has never waned, and Ararat has become a focus of both religious curiosity and adventure tourism. Climbing Mount Ararat is not only a journey through elevation but through political complexity. The mountain is located in Turkey's province, a region marked by ethnic tensions, particularly between the Turkish government and Kurdish populations. For years, climbing the mountain was forbidden, largely due to security concerns and geopolitical sensitivities. It wasn't until the late 20th century that access was gradually reopened, and today, permits from the Turkish government are required to attempt a summit. Climbers must be accompanied by local guides, many of whom are Kurdish, and monitored by military checkpoints along the route. The standard ascent route begins in the town of Dubayazd, a dusty settlement nestled at the base of the mountain. Here, visitors often stop to visit the Ishak Pasha Palace, a stunning Ottoman-era fortress with Persian and Armenian architectural influences. From Dubayazd, climbers are transported to the village of Eli, where the trek begins. The ascent is typically staged over several days, with high camps established around 3,200 meters and 4,200 meters. The summit push begins in darkness, usually around 2 a.m., as climbers slog through snow and ice under the moon, ascending steeply toward the icy crown of the mountain. The final stretch requires crampons and determination. The thin air, biting cold, and rapid gain in altitude make the summit challenge intense. But the reward is immense. From the top, the view is nothing short of biblical. To the north, the green expanses of Armenia. To the east, the jagged peaks of Iran. To the west, the Anatolian heartland, and all around, the shimmering white fields of glacial ice. On especially clear days, Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus can be glimpsed in the far distance. In terms of ecology, Mount Ararat's slopes host surprisingly rich biodiversity in the lower elevations. Alpine meadows, wildflowers, juniper scrub, and scattered pine groves give way to barren volcanic rock and glacial fields above 4,000 meters. Herds of ibex and mouflon roam the foothills, and golden eagles, lammergeiers, and other birds of prey circle its thermals. In spring, the base of the mountain explodes with colorful blossoms, red tulips, blue irises, and yellow mustard flowers, set against a backdrop of black basalt and white snow. Nomadic Kurdish herders still drive their sheep and goats across these lower slopes, living in seasonal tents and tending to a way of life that has existed here since antiquity. But even a mountain as massive and timeless as Ararat is not immune to change. Glacial retreat, due to climate change, is reshaping the summit. In recent decades, the glacier has diminished significantly, exposing more of the volcanic rock beneath. The spiritual and ecological legacy of the mountain depends on sustainable stewardship and cross-border cooperation, something that has proven difficult in this geopolitically sensitive region. Yet, for many, the power of Ararat lies not in science or politics, but in its sheer presence. It is a mountain that seems to rise out of myth, a place where the physical and the symbolic converge. It commands reverence from believers, awe from travelers, and longing from a nation. Even for those who never touch its slopes, its silhouette carries meaning, etched in memory, painted in longing, whispered in prayer. In the end, Mount Ararat is more than the sum of its rock and snow. It is a monument to endurance, to sacredness, and to the stories we tell about ourselves. Whether viewed through the lens of Genesis, Armenian history, Kurdish folklore, or volcanic geology, it remains utterly transcendent, a beacon in the sky, as still as faith and as vast as time. Mount Ojos del Salado rises from the fiery heart of the Atacama Desert like a monument to extremes, raw, remote, and regal. Straddling the desolate border between Chile and Argentina, this immense peak holds the title of the highest active volcano on Earth, towering at 6,893 meters, 22,615 feet, above sea level. It is the second highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, outdone only by Aconcagua, and it dwarfs everything around it for hundreds of kilometers. But Ojos del Salado is not just about altitude, it is about isolation, geological power, and surreal beauty. Here, life brushes up against the edge of death, and the earth bears its bones under a blazing sky. The name Ojos del Salado means Eyes of the Salty One, a poetic nod to the salt lagoons and brine crusts that glint like tears around its flanks. Unlike the verdant slopes of Andean giants like Huascaran or Chimborazo, Ojos is stark and stripped, its slopes painted in shades of rust, ochre, black, and bone white. The mountain rises from one of the driest places on the planet, where some weather stations have gone decades without a single drop of rain. This hyperarid region receives less than 10 millimeters of annual precipitation, making it a natural laboratory for understanding Mars-like environments. And yet, paradoxically, atop this arid colossus lies one of the highest permanent bodies of water on Earth, a small crater lake at 6,390 meters, 20,965 feet, frozen over for most of the year and nestled within a barren volcanic bowl. Geologically, Ojos del Salado is a stratovolcano, part of the Andean Central Volcanic Zone, formed by the subduction of the Nazca Plate beneath the South American Plate. The volcano is technically active, though its last known eruption was in the 14th century, and only minor fumarolic activity, small gas emissions, has been detected in recent years. Still, the mountain breathes. Its crater and flanks are scattered with sulfur vents, steam fissures, and mineral-streaked rocks that testify to the fire within. The landscape here is as otherworldly as it gets, an alien world of wind, stone, and silence. Climbing Ojos del Salado is a feat of physical and psychological endurance, not because of technical difficulty. It is considered a non-technical ascent by its standard route, but due to its altitude, remoteness, and environmental hostility. Most expeditions begin in the Chilean city of Copiapo, a dusty mining town nestled far inland from the Pacific. From there, climbers are ferried across vast stretches of empty desert to the Altiplano, a high plateau ringed by volcanoes, salt flats, and mineral-rich basins. The approach alone is a journey into another realm. Travelers pass steaming geothermal fields, fossilized lava flows, and mirror-like salar basins such as Salar de Maracunga and Salar de Pedernales, their surfaces crusted in white salt crystals and rimmed by volcanic peaks painted in surreal desert hues. At the base of the mountain lie a series of refugios, shelters, established at strategic intervals for climbers: Refugio Murray, Refugio Atacama, and finally Refugio Tejos, which at 5,825 meters, 19,111 feet, is the highest permanent structure in the world. The journey to the summit is staged over several days to allow for acclimatization, with climbers gradually pushing higher and higher into thinner air and more brutal cold. The final summit day is a long, punishing trudge over loose volcanic scree, wind-blasted ridges, and a final scramble across icy rock to the summit. From the top, the view is not merely breathtaking, it is transcendental. The vastness of the Atacama Desert unfolds below, punctuated by jagged peaks, lifeless plains, and silvered lakes that seem to belong more to a dream than to Earth. The curvature of the planet is visible on the horizon. There are few moments on Earth when one feels closer to space than when standing atop Ojos del Salado. The surrounding terrain is just as awe-inspiring. To the west lies the Atacama Desert, the driest non-polar desert in the world, a place where NASA has tested Mars rovers, and where the only sign of life may be a twisted cushion plant, a high-altitude moss clinging to survival in a barren basin. To the east, the Puna de Atacama stretches into Argentina, a high-altitude desert plateau dotted with more volcanoes, salt flats, and flamingo-dotted lagoons. The air here is so dry and the skies so clear that the European Southern Observatory's ALMA project, one of the world's most advanced astronomical facilities, was built nearby to gaze into the cosmos unimpeded. Despite its dryness, the region surrounding Ojos del Salado has a subtle ecological heartbeat. In lower elevations and isolated wetlands, called Vegas, one can find vicuñas, Andean foxes, and occasionally condors riding thermals over the peaks. In these harsh environments, life has adapted with ingenious efficiency, surviving on meltwater trickles and the nutrients carried by highland winds. Archaeological evidence suggests that Inca priests once made ceremonial climbs to mountains like Ojos, part of a sacred geography where the peaks themselves were considered gods, and sacrifices were made at dizzying altitudes in homage to Apis, or mountain spirits. And yet, as pristine as this environment may appear, it is not untouched. Mining operations, especially for lithium and copper, have begun to encroach on the broader region. The Andean Plateau is rich in rare earths and metals, and its isolation makes it attractive to extraction industries. Conservation efforts are increasing, but the balance between preservation and development remains precarious. Despite these challenges, Ojos del Salado remains one of the last true wilderness peaks on Earth, a place where solitude is absolute, where the elements reign supreme, and where humanity feels very small. It is a landscape that humbles climbers and captivates scientists, where the Earth's violent past is still written in stone, and where the silence of millennia hangs in the thin, icy air. This is not a mountain of lush forests or mythical legends. It is a mountain of raw reality, of salt and fire, of silence and space. To stand on its summit is to confront the vastness not just of the Earth, but of time itself. Every gust of wind, every frozen shadow cast by the summit ridge, is a reminder that here, in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, beauty is carved from extremes. Mount Ojos del Salado is not merely the highest active volcano in the world. It is the Earth exposed, stripped to its elements, bathed in light and shadow, where sky and stone meet at the edge of what is humanly endurable. Mount Toubkal stands tall as the crowned monarch of North Africa, its summit soaring 4,167 meters, 13,671 feet, above sea level, piercing the skies above the rugged expanse of Morocco's high Atlas Mountains. Known in Arabic as Jebel Toubkal, this colossal massif is not only the highest peak in Morocco but also in the entire Atlas mountain range, and by extension, the loftiest point in all of North Africa. Rising dramatically from the semi-arid foothills and traditional Berber villages that scatter the valleys below, Toubkal is a place of contrasts. snow-capped ridges above scorched deserts, lush oases nestled among crags, and ancient pathways etched into living stone. Located about 63 kilometers south of Marrakesh, Mount Toubkal emerges from the heart of the Toubkal National Park, an area of staggering natural beauty and deep cultural significance. The mountain is part of the Western High Atlas, a range formed some 65 million years ago during the Alpine orogeny, around the same time the Alps and Himalayas were uplifted. Over eons, tectonic forces sculpted and fractured the landscape, lifting vast slabs of limestone and volcanic rock into jagged, folded ridges that today stretch across southern Morocco like a frozen sea of stone. Climbing Toubkal is both accessible and mythic. Though it is not technically difficult in the summer, the mountain demands respect due to its altitude, shifting weather, and unforgiving terrain. Most ascents begin in the quaint village of Imlil, a Berber outpost nestled in a green valley at 1,740 meters, where traditional mud brick homes cling to steep hillsides, and mule trails wind through walnut groves and terraced fields. From here, trekkers begin the journey up a well-worn path that passes Sidi Shamharouk, a whitewashed shrine and settlement perched beside a mountain stream. This sacred site, dedicated to a local saint, is believed by many to be haunted or blessed by jinn, the supernatural spirits of Islamic folklore, and pilgrims visit it for healing and spiritual guidance. Beyond Sidi Shamharouk, the route climbs steeply along rocky ridges and gorges until it reaches the Toubkal Refuge, a rustic mountain hut at 3,207 meters where most climbers spend the night before the summit push. Here, amid steaming plates of couscous and pots of mint tea, travelers from around the world gather, united by the shared rhythm of high-altitude aspiration. Mules rest outside, tethered to the stone walls, and the night air grows thin and sharp with frost as the stars emerge above the craggy peaks. The summit attempt begins before dawn, with headlamps bobbing in the dark like fireflies as climbers ascend steep scree slopes, often still streaked with snow and ice well into summer. The final approach winds through a notch between jagged buttresses and then up a ridge of broken rock to the summit plateau. As the sun rises over the Sahara to the east, the full majesty of Toubkal unfolds, a panorama of serrated peaks, deep valleys, and ridgelines that fade into a golden haze. The view stretches for hundreds of kilometers, over the Atlas Range, across rolling plains, and toward the gleaming desert beyond. On exceptionally clear days, the Atlantic Ocean is visible to the west. Though many see Toubkal as a hiking destination, the mountain holds deep spiritual and historical resonance for the Amazigh, Berber, people, the indigenous inhabitants of North Africa. For centuries, they have called this land home, their villages built from stone and earth, their culture passed down in oral poetry, music, and shared rituals. The mountains are not simply terrain, they are ancestral guardians, sources of water and life, and dwellings of both blessing and peril. Shepherds still guide flocks along centuries-old paths, speaking Tamazight, the Berber language, and living lives largely unchanged by modernity. Local legends speak of mountain spirits, saints, and reclusive mystics who once dwelled in caves along Toubkal's flanks. The mountain has long been a place of pilgrimage and prayer, with seasonal festivals held in nearby villages to mark changes in the agricultural calendar. The blending of Islamic faith and pre-Islamic traditions has created a complex spiritual landscape, where Sufi shrines coexist with tales of enchanted wells, healing springs, and hidden treasure guarded by jinn. Toubkal, in this sense, is not just a climb, it is a journey through myth and memory. Ecologically, the High Atlas is a biological refuge, a green archipelago amid a sea of desert. The Toubkal area is home to a variety of endemic and endangered species, including the Barbary leopard, though rarely seen, Barbary sheep, jackals, and Cuvier's gazelles. Bird life is abundant, from the bearded vulture and golden eagle to alpine species like choughs and rock thrushes. The vegetation changes with elevation, from olive groves and home oaks at lower altitudes to juniper forests and alpine meadows dotted with wild thyme, lavender, and crocus flowers near the snowline. In spring, the valleys explode in color, while in winter, heavy snow blankets the high ridges, transforming the mountain into a pristine and silent cathedral of ice. Toubkal's climatic duality, snow and sun, desert and peak, makes it a unique testing ground for adventurers, as well as a vivid symbol of Morocco's natural wealth. It is also increasingly recognized as a climate-sensitive zone, vulnerable to changing weather patterns. Glacial retreat and decreasing snowfall have been observed in recent decades, posing risks to downstream communities that rely on meltwater for agriculture. Conservation efforts within Toubkal National Park, established in 1942, are ongoing, but the balance between tourism and sustainability is delicate. Every year, thousands of trekkers walk its trails, bringing income to local economies but also leaving behind waste and wear. Yet despite these pressures, Mount Kirkjufell retains a kind of sacred silence, especially in the early hours on its wind-blasted summit. It is a silence not of emptiness, but of fullness, the presence of something ancient, watchful, and enduring. Whether encountered by Berber shepherds, 19th-century French explorers, or modern climbers from across the globe, Kirkjufell inspires a common reverence. The mountain is not ostentatious, it does not shout its power. It simply stands, as it has for millions of years, carved by tectonic might and crowned with starlight. To ascend Kirkjufell is to move through layers of time, geological, cultural, spiritual. It is to walk paths first worn by barefoot traders and mystics, to sleep beneath skies clearer than any urban mind remembers, to hear the call of prayer echo off stone ridges, and to feel, on that final wind-whipped crest, the fullness of distance and the closeness of sky. Mount Kirkjufell is not merely the roof of North Africa, it is its soul in stone, forever reaching upward. Mount Bromo emerges from the depths of the Tengah caldera in East Java like a vision drawn from myth and dream. Its smoking crater, set within a vast sea of ash and ringed by towering walls, creates one of the most surreal and iconic volcanic landscapes in all of Asia. Though modest in elevation, standing at 2,329 meters, 7,641 feet, Mount Bromo's stark, otherworldly setting and continuous volcanic breath have made it a symbol of Indonesia's wild heart. Its beauty is explosive as its geology. Part of the Bromo Tengah Semeru National Park, Mount Bromo sits within a massive 10-kilometer-wide ancient caldera, the remnant of a much older and more colossal volcano that collapsed in prehistoric times. Inside this vast circular bowl lies an alien world, a barren, ash-covered plain known as the Sea of Sand, Lautan Pesa, across which rise several active and dormant cones, including Mount Batak with its perfect conical symmetry, and beyond them all, the higher, perpetually smoking Mount Semeru, the tallest mountain on Java. Among this jagged family of volcanoes, Bromo itself is the most famous and most revered, its jagged rim perpetually steaming, its interior rumbling softly like a sleeping god. What sets Bromo apart is not just its geology, but the way the sky and light interact with its landscape. The most ethereal moment is at sunrise, when thousands of travelers and pilgrims wake in the chilly pre-dawn hours and make their way to Mount Pananjakan, a ridge overlooking the caldera. As the sun breaks the horizon, the entire landscape is bathed in golden-orange light. Mount Bromo exhaling smoke like incense from an altar, Mount Batak standing silent, and the Sea of Sand glowing in shadow and color. The swirling mists and clouds often roll over the edges of the crater, partially obscuring the mountains in a veil that adds to the illusion that this is no earthly scene, but a suspended realm of light and fire. Geologically, Bromo is one of the most active volcanoes in Indonesia, which itself is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a region of intense seismic and volcanic activity due to the subduction of the Indo-Australian plate beneath the Eurasian plate. Eruptions from Bromo are frequent but generally modest, often producing plumes of ash and gas rather than lava flows. These minor eruptions, however, are far from trivial. Ash can ground flights, cover villages, and send locals fleeing down the caldera walls. The last major eruption occurred in 2015 to 2016, when Bromo sent towering columns of ash high into the atmosphere, disrupting local agriculture and cloaking everything in a fine layer of grey. Yet despite the danger, Bromo remains central to the spiritual life of the Tenggerese people, the Hindu-Buddhist minority that inhabits the villages scattered around the national park. According to Tenggerese legend, the mountain was created when a princess named Roro Anteng and her husband Joko Siga prayed to the gods for children. The gods granted them 24, but demanded that the 25th child be sacrificed into the crater. In fulfillment of this promise, their youngest son, Kisuma, was cast into the volcano, and from that day on, the Tenggerese have honored him and the mountain gods with the Yardnya Kasada festival, held every year during the full moon of the 12th month of the Tenggerese calendar. During Yardnya Kasada, devotees trek up the mountain's slope in the dead of night, climbing the narrow trail to the rim of the crater. As dawn breaks, they begin their offerings, vegetables, livestock, flowers, coins, and food, all hurled into the smoky abyss to appease the spirits of the mountain. In a striking fusion of devotion and danger, some villagers even descend partway into the crater with nets and sacks, risking burns and gas exposure to catch the offerings mid-air, an act considered both taboo and desperate necessity. The mountain and its people coexist in a complex and profound spiritual ecology. The volcano is not feared, but respected, an active deity in a pantheon of sky and earth. This reverence is passed down generationally, woven into stories, rituals, and daily life. Local homes often feature shrines facing the mountain, and even outside of formal festival times, prayers and offerings are left along the paths leading to Bromo's rim. Access to the crater is both simple and astonishing. After traversing the sea of sand, often by foot, motorbike, or on horseback guided by local villagers, visitors climb a flight of 250 steep concrete steps that rise to the lip of the volcano. From there, they peer into a yawning, sulphurous void. The crater's edge is narrow, windy, and vertiginous, with no railings on most of its perimeter. Inside, the earth rumbles softly, and a deep hole vents sulphurous steam upward. The inner walls are coated in mineral stains, grey, yellow, black, etched with eons of eruption and erosion. The surrounding region is starkly beautiful in its own right. Beyond the sea of sand lie alpine meadows, pine forests, and hidden waterfalls like Madakarapura, said to have been a meditation site for Gajamada, a legendary Javanese military leader. The climate in the higher elevations is surprisingly cool, even cold at night, and the thin air adds to the sense that one is navigating between worlds. Wild horses roam freely in parts of the caldera, their silhouettes cutting across the ash plain like creatures from legend. The tourism that Mount Bromo attracts, hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, is both a boon and a challenge. While the economy of the Tengarese villages now thrives on guiding, lodging, and horseback services, the foot traffic has led to erosion, trash accumulation, and stress on local ecosystems. Conservation efforts are increasing, particularly through the work of Bromo Tengah Semeru National Park authorities, who have instituted cleanup campaigns, access limits, and education programs. But the sheer magnetism of the site means its exposure to the world is growing each year. Still, despite these pressures, Mount Bromo retains its elemental power. It is not a remote giant like Denali or a solitary peak like Fuji. It is a mountain deeply embedded in the human and spiritual fabric of the land it rises from. Its modest height belies its overwhelming presence. Bromo is alive, not just volcanically, but culturally, emotionally, and mythologically. There are few places on Earth where geological time and human myth intertwine so intimately. Standing at the edge of Bromo's smoking moor, one feels not fear, but awe, a kind of wordless understanding that here, at this confluence of fire, ash, and sky, something eternal resides. It is not simply a mountain. It is a breathing altar, a place where the veil between the worlds is thin, where prayers take the shape of smoke, and where light bends over the rim of the earth as if rising not into morning, but into legend. Mount Roraima rises from the humid heart of South America like a monolith from another planet. Sheer, flat-topped, and brooding, a vast stone island in the sky that has mystified, inspired, and enchanted for centuries. Located at the tri-junction of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana, this colossal tabletop mountain, or tepui, is one of the most extraordinary geological formations on Earth, standing as the crowning jewel of the Guiana Highlands. With its vertical cliffs soaring over 400 meters, 1,300 feet, and its summit plateau sprawling across 31 square kilometers, 12 square miles, Roraima seems less like a mountain and more like a prime-val fortress, untouched by time and shrouded in cloud and mystery. The mountain has often been called the island in time, a fitting title for a landform that is both geologically ancient and ecologically unique. The rocks that compose Roraima are part of the Roraima Formation, among the oldest exposed rocks on Earth, dating back to 2 billion years ago, long before the rise of dinosaurs or even complex life. These rocks have weathered through unimaginable epochs, resisting erosion while the lands around them wore away, leaving these tepes as stone sentinels standing alone in the mist. Mount Roraima is the most famous of the tepes, a distinctive class of mountains found only in the Guiana Shield region. What makes Roraima so otherworldly is its perfectly flat summit, surrounded on all sides by near-vertical cliffs that plunge down into the dense jungle below. The sides of the mountain are so steep that for centuries, local people believed the summit was inaccessible, and indeed, it was not until 1884 that the first recorded European expedition, led by Sir Everard Thurn, successfully reached the top by discovering a single natural ramp on the Venezuelan side. The summit itself is a surreal and often mist-shrouded world, unlike anything else on Earth. It rains almost daily. The clouds rise from the Amazon basin and crash into the Tepui's massive walls, releasing torrential downpours that carve rivers and pools across the stone. This constant deluge, coupled with extreme isolation, has created an entirely unique ecosystem on the summit plateau. Over millions of years, plant and animal species here have evolved independently, making the top of Roraima a kind of living laboratory for evolution. Vegetation is sparse but bizarre. Carnivorous plants such as helianthera, sun pitchers, rare orchids, mosses, and lichens thrive in the nutrient-poor soils. These pitcher plants, with their elegant tubular forms, trap insects in rainwater-filled cups, digesting them slowly to survive in the acidic, barren landscape. Strange rock formations shaped by wind and rain at the plateau, spires, arches, and towers that resemble otherworldly sculptures. Pools filled with orange-colored pebbles line the summit like natural mosaics, while small rivulets snake across the stone before plunging off the edge in spectacular waterfalls that disappear into the jungle far below. One of Roraima's most famous features is the jacuzzi pools, a series of crystal-clear basins formed in natural rock depressions, often rimmed with black algae and filled with icy rainwater. On sunny days, these pools gleam like polished mirrors reflecting the sky. The contrast between the wet, lichen-slicked stone and the occasional splash of brilliant color from a flower or butterfly gives the whole summit an uncanny, dreamlike feel. This surreal landscape is perhaps most famously immortalized in literature. Mount Roraima was the primary inspiration for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel The Lost World. In the novel, explorers discover a hidden plateau where dinosaurs and prehistoric life have survived undisturbed for millennia. Doyle's fictionalized Roraima sparked a wave of fascination with the Tepus as realms outside of time, a reputation that persists to this day. And when looking across the fog-draped summit, it's easy to see why. The plateau feels suspended not only in space, but in an epoch before time, untouched by human sprawl or modernity. Accessing Mount Roraima is a journey unto itself. The standard trek begins in Tepuy, a small indigenous Peman village in Venezuela, from where guided expeditions set out on a 6-day round-trip trek, 3 days to the summit, a day exploring the top, and 2 days descending. The path cuts through savanna, river crossings, and dense rainforest, gradually rising until the jungle gives way to open highlands and the colossal walls of Roraima loom into view like the ramparts of a forgotten citadel. From below, the cliffs seem endless, and the sound of waterfalls echoes from unseen heights. The final ascent to the summit is achieved through the La Rampa, a steep, mossy gully that zigzags up the only natural breach in the vertical cliffs. Even here, the climb is slippery, humid, and challenging, with narrow ledges, sudden drop-offs, and mist obscuring the path. But reaching the summit is like entering another world. The air turns cool and damp, the landscape flattens, and silence takes over, broken only by the wind and falling water. Roraima's summit isn't just unique for its ecology, it also holds cultural and spiritual significance. To the Peman and Kapon peoples, the mountain is sacred. In their oral traditions, it is known as Mother of all waters, and is considered the stump of a giant sacred tree that once held all the fruits and life of the earth before it was felled by a trickster. The many rivers and waterfalls that descend from Roraima are seen as the lifeblood of the world, feeding the jungles and plains below. Even today, local guides often treat the mountain with a quiet reverence, leaving offerings and observing taboos when guiding trekkers across its summit. Despite its remoteness, Mount Roraima is increasingly vulnerable. Political instability in Venezuela, coupled with growing tourism and illegal mining, has put pressure on the fragile ecosystems around and atop the mountain. The Tepuy formations are notoriously fragile. Even a single misstep can damage mosses and lichens that take decades to recover. Conservation efforts are underway, but the region's remoteness makes regulation difficult, and the lure of gold in nearby regions threatens both environmental and cultural integrity. Yet for those who make the journey, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, Mount Roraima leaves a mark unlike any other. It is a place that defies easy comparison, a fusion of geological time, biological wonder, and ancestral myth. It is at once ancient and timeless, a window into Earth's past and a reminder of its strangeness and beauty. To stand on its summit, surrounded by swirling clouds and bizarre formations, is to stand on the edge of human comprehension, a place where rain never stops falling, where life has evolved apart, and where the sky touches stone in a silence deeper than language. Mount Roraima is not just a mountain. It is a world above the world, a last fragment of a forgotten realm, drifting in the clouds. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.